Chapter 58. An array that restricts the light element. Huh? It really took a lot of effort. Yin Nuoxing glanced at the pitch-black world, then looked at the rapidly declining light particles on her body. She looked at the motionless man in black clothes and said, "However, it's useless." Useless. The man in black clothes raised his head. He had a mediocre face, the kind that was hard to find in the crowd. But the most frightening thing about him was that his eyes were deep black without any white. It was as if two black pearls were forcibly embedded in his eyes. The man grinned and said, "You'll know once you try." With a wave of his hand, many small arrays floated on the ground, shooting out several hundred pitch-black chains, which rapidly swept towards Yin Nuoxing. The instant the chains appeared, the surrounding space instantly darkened, as if all the light had been absorbed by the chains. Yin Nuoxing's expression didn't change. Pouring the light essence into the halberd, he raised his palm and lightly swept it towards the rapidly approaching chain, breaking it apart inch by inch. However, the light essence on the halberd was absorbed in a split second, and the only thing that broke the chain was the energy contained in the halberd. With a thought from the man in black clothes, the black energy pervading the air condensed, transforming into a huge pitch-black palm, and slapped down towards Yin Nuoxing. The air in the area in front of the palm was completely expelled, and the terrifying force caused several dozen thumb-sized cracks to appear on the ground below. The gale pressed Hong E tightly against her body. Yin Nuoxing unhurriedly raised her halberd and swept it again, sending that huge pitch-black palm flying, with cracks all over it. "I already said, it's useless." Yawning lazily, Yin Nuoxing looked at the man in black clothes with ridicule in her eyes. Although she was somewhat surprised by the array that could absorb the light element, she had a divine tool in her hand. Even if she could break his light element, she still had to think of a way to break his weapon. When the surrounding people saw the two colliding, they hastily retreated, afraid of being affected. Then they opened their eyes wide to watch this chaotic duel. The man in black clothes frowned. His hands formed a seal, and several pitch-black talismans appeared in the air, converging into a sphere. With a wave of his hand, this sphere condensed from talismans flew towards Yin Nuoxing, who was calm and unruffled in the midst of chaos. It whistled as it absorbed the energy of heaven and earth, strengthening its own might. Boom! What responded to him was still a halberd attack. The talismans completely collapsed, and black energy exploded in the air. However, when it approached Yin Nuoxing, it was refined by a thin layer of faint blue flames on her body. Patting Hong E with her jade-like hand, Yin Nuoxing looked at the man in black. Her beautiful eyes contained traces of smile as she teased, "Are you done?" The black-clothed man's face twitched violently. At this point, he could say with absolute certainty that this seemingly normal-looking halberd was definitely a high-grade weapon. No wonder she was so fearless. This was her trump card, using a divine tool to fight in a group battle. How could they fight? No matter how many people came, they would just be sending themselves to death. That's a divine tool? On the viewing platform, the beautiful woman looked at the halberd and smiled unnaturally. "Yes, that's right." Jin Wang nodded. He didn't feel the slightest bit surprised, because when he saw Yin Nuoxing take out more than 10 divine tools to set up the array that day, he was so shocked that he was speechless. "Oh, why aren't you fighting? You asked me to try." "I've already tried, but it's useless." Yin Nuoxing stretched lazily, waved the halberd in her hand, and smiled at the man in black clothes. F*CKU, goddess of primordial, put down your weapon if you have the ability, and I'll give you a quick death. The man in black clothes was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. He stomped his feet and cursed. "Yes, I think that having a divine tool is my ability. If you're not convinced, you can take one out yourself." Yin Nuoxing thought for a moment, nodded, and said seriously, F*CK, I've never seen such a shameless person. How are we supposed to fight like this?" Yin Nuoxing waved her hand, tilted her head, and put away the halberd. She smiled. "So, since you're done fighting, it's my turn. As you wish, I'll put away the halberd, Before the man in black and the others could breathe a sigh of relief, a bright green light suddenly appeared in the sky. It flickered and extended into countless threads. Runes appeared from the void, and the energy of heaven and earth became chaotic at this moment. The power of stars descended from the sky, and cracks appeared on the ground. Milky white air rushed out from the cracks. Kacha, puffed. All the energy surged into those green threads and instantly broke through this pitch-black array. The backlash made the man in black groan, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. In just an instant, all the green threads were annihilated, and the world regained its tranquility. Bright sunlight shone down from the sky and shone on everyone, giving them a warm feeling. Bam! The sudden sound of flesh colliding pulled everyone's attention back from their daydreaming. They hurriedly looked at the field. A black figure drew a beautiful arc in the sky and smashed onto the ground outside the field. The sound of bones breaking made everyone's hearts contract fiercely. In the field, Yin Nuashing retracted her leg and smiled. "You're just so." Outside the field, the man in black clothes, who had yet to react, was so angry that his whole body was trembling. He couldn't catch his breath, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood before fainting. The halberd lit up in Yin Nuashing's hand again, and she waved it at the less than half of the people left in the field. She smiled sweetly and said, "Shall we attack together?" Everyone was stunned. They should have been angry that she looked down on them like this. However, when they looked at the halberd in their hands that was even longer than Yin Nuashing's body, they instantly lost their temper. How were they going to fight with a divine-level halberd and light elements? You can either jump out yourselves or be slapped out by me. Choose one. After thinking for a while, Yin Nuashing pursed her red lips and said with a smile after a moment, "Little Xin is so naughty." In the spectator stands, Yu-Yin curled her lips and pinched her thigh hard to stop herself from laughing out loud. The field was abnormally quiet now, and although many people were gnashing their teeth when they heard this, no one dared to stand out and shout. If they were treated just like this, they would be labeled as cowards who ran away without fighting. If they really fought, they would probably be wiped out in an instant. That was a divine-level weapon, something that all the great factions treated like a treasure. Now that the beautiful girl in front of them was holding one, they were both envious and angry. They really didn't know what to say. Now you know how I felt back then? Yin Nuashing tilted his head. His voice was filled with resentment as he said, "I originally didn't have any interest in these strange competitions. I also had my own matters to attend to. Time was tight, and I only came to Star Luo City to rest for a while. Who knew that you guys would declare war on me? I couldn't leave, but I also didn't want to fight. Now, the evils I brought upon myself are the hardest to bear. Am I courting death?" After he finished speaking, he sighed helplessly. When everyone heard this, they felt like crying. "Little girl, no. Big sister, please get this straight. Those people who declared war have all been slapped out of the field by you, and they don't even know what's good for them. We're just passing by, and it has nothing to do with us. You're a magnanimous person, so please don't bicker with us." Yin Nuashing sighed and said seriously, "Actually, I'm quite easy to get along with. You guys made things difficult for me, so let me vent my anger. I won't let you guys crawl out or hold onto the wall to get out." Don't. I'll walk out, okay." Hearing this, some people's expressions changed instantly. What kind of joke was this? It was fine if she didn't crawl out after venting her anger, but they would probably have to walk out lying down. Then, before they were thrown out, they'd better crawl out by themselves. Come on. We'd rather die than be humiliated. However, some people chose to fight. Although they knew that they would be slapped out, they still chose to do so. After all, they were all young heroes of their generation. So how could they avoid a fight? Bam! Of course, the person who spoke was sent flying out as soon as he finished speaking. He didn't even have time to react, leaving behind a girl who looked at him indifferently. "Boss, your light element doesn't seem to be as fast as hers?" Beside him, Lei Ming pulled Yao Hua aside and asked softly. This kind of speed that was close to teleportation was even faster than Yao Hua's speed. "I didn't use my full strength. Moreover, Yin Nuoxing's light element is much purer than mine. Yao Hua carefully glanced at Yin Nuoxing and explained in a low voice. In this world, there weren't many people who had the light element. Moreover, even if there were, the light element they obtained might not be pure enough, and it would hinder their power. However, Yin Nuoxing's light element was the purest, and it wasn't much worse than the elders in the light shrine. The people in the audience were a little dumbfounded. The first round of this year's Young Heroes competition ended just like that? Was the goddess too strong, or was that magical weapon too ferocious? Is this really not considered breaking the rules? Jin Wang laughed bitterly as he looked at the white-haired old man beside him and asked. The white-haired old man opened his eyes slightly, glanced at Yin Nuoxing for a moment, and said unhurriedly, "This kind of competition isn't considered formal in the first place. In the end, it's just like the previous competitions that were formed on their own. After all, cultivation and fortuitous encounters are all part of one's strength. There's no violation to speak of. If you're not convinced, you can take out your sealed weapon and fight." "I won't say anything," Jin Wang shrugged. What he said was the truth. If they met in other places, they would use all their means, and there wouldn't be any restrictions. Now, all of them were lying outside without dying, and that was the best result. Since the master of Starnet Palace didn't say anything, then it was naturally inappropriate for him to say anything. Moreover, everyone had their own scale in their hearts, and everyone knew the result of the competition in their hearts. At this moment, those who were clamoring for a big battle in the arena were all sent flying by the halberd. Yin Nuoxing's energy seemed to be limitless. No matter how many people sent their energy up, she didn't seem to be exhausted. This made everyone a little depressed. Didn't they say that the light element consumed too much energy and couldn't be used continuously? Yin Nuoxing only stopped when only Mu Ling, Yao Hua, and the others were left in the arena. Just as she was about to put away the halberd, the latter flickered with light, and then, under everyone's shocked gazes, it scuttled into her left forearm. A lifelike pattern of a halberd appeared on her jade-white forearm. The magical weapon has recognized its master. The gold god king blinked his eyes, a little dazed. This little girl was too much. She could actually let the divine artifact make her own choice. This was something that many people would want. Why is there another one? However, this kind of thing that others yearned for but couldn't obtain seemed to be a nightmare to Yin Nuoxing. Everyone was instantly dumbfounded when they heard his complaint. "There's another one? What does that mean? Don't tell me you have more than one in your body." "Sigh. It doesn't matter if there's another one." Yin Nuoxing sighed and muttered to herself. "Crazy." Chapter 59. The first round of the competition in the 12 venues ended in a very dramatic and shocking manner. There wasn't even a meaningful battle. All they saw was the divine maiden slaughtering her opponents one-sidedly with the divine tool in her hand. Are you kidding me? How can this be? Can the person in charge of the competition come out and say something? Is this really not considered breaking the rules? One person is holding a divine artifact. How are the others supposed to fight? Of course, many people were unhappy that the competition ended so abruptly. They felt that Yin Nuoxing had taken advantage of the divine artifact. Otherwise, the competition wouldn't have ended so easily. They felt that she should be restricted from using it. In a real battle to the death, there are no such considerations. No matter what method is used, as long as one survives, it's a victory. It's a joke to have so many rules and regulations. If you're unhappy that someone else is holding a divine artifact, you can bring your own divine artifact. We won't say anything either. In the end, the Young Heroes competition only restricts the participants from fighting to the death. There are no other restrictions. The white-haired elder appeared in the arena, and his heavy voice echoed throughout the venue. At this moment, many people came back to their senses. They remembered the original nature of the Young Heroes competition. It was a life and death battle. There were no restrictions at all. The survival was the king. Now that the competition had restricted life and death, it was already the greatest improvement. Otherwise, who knew how many heroes would die each time? It would be a huge loss for the Young Heroes competition. Moreover, Even a member of the organizer came out and said so. It was not good for the others to say anything. In a quiet courtyard, more than 10 people were sitting casually. They were Mu Ling and the others who had come back to rest after a big battle. However, this time, they had also pulled Yin Nuoxing and the others over. In the courtyard, Ming's childish laughter could be heard continuously. He was very happy. Perhaps it was the innocence of a child. From the initial timidity when he first met Yin Nuoxing to the current familiarity and intimacy, it didn't take much time. The little guy stuck to Yin Nuoxing all day long. He looked like a little follower. His innocent personality was quite endearing. However, what made Yin Nuoxing a little regretful was that Jin Wang and the others had never seen this little girl before. After hearing the whole story, they couldn't help but feel pity for her. They didn't know if she was homesick now. Sister is my home. Wherever she goes, that's where my home is. However, when everyone saw Ming jump up to hug Yin Nuoxing and say those words with an innocent face, they couldn't help but laugh and praise her flawless personality. Ming has an extremely powerful energy in his body, but it seems to be sealed and cannot be used. Jin Wang said after checking carefully. Everyone, including Yin Nuoxing, was a little surprised. This energy is hidden very deeply. It's normal that you can't see it. Jin Wang saw his doubts and explained softly. Yin Nuoxing nodded. Suddenly, she thought of something and gently raised her slender right hand. With a thought, the divine light mirror appeared in her palm. Suddenly, the sound of water gushing could be heard in the courtyard. Do you recognize this mirror? Seeing everyone's reaction, Yin Nuoxing was slightly delighted and hurriedly asked, where did you get it? In the courtyard, everyone except Yin and Ming hurriedly gathered around. Their eyes were wide open, as if they had seen a ghost. I got it by accident. Yin Nuoxing took a step back and said when she saw their stunned expressions. Yao Hua frowned and looked at it for a long time, then slowly said, "This is the divine light weapon left behind by the founder of the Light Temple. It has been lost with his disappearance for many years. I know you want to find out about your origins, but I don't know much. The old ancestor disappeared after their last battle. If I'm not mistaken, he should have died." Yao Hua scratched his head and said with a little regret, "The location of the old ancestor's last battle was in the Ganyuan territory. I don't know the exact location, but it seems to be somewhere east. The history books don't record too much. The Ganyuan territory is so far." Yin Nuoxing's jaw almost dropped when she heard this. She was still worried about going to the Divine Prefecture, but in an instant, she had to cross the Divine Prefecture and go straight to the Ganyuan territory. It's not too far. There's a teleportation gate. Seeing her frightened face, Mu Ling covered her mouth and laughed. "Where is there?" Yin Nuoxing's eyes lit up and she hurriedly asked. "The Divine Prefecture in the center. There are many teleportation gates there, and our 9-elemental temple also has one." Huaji's eyes wandered, and there was a hint of temptation in her words. "I'm not going." Yin Nuoxing stuck out her tongue and said with a smile in front of everyone's widened eyes, "I want to travel all the way to Xingming City. After I reach the Divine Prefecture, I'll slowly wander to the Ganyuan territory." "That's really..." Jin Wang's face twitched. With Spirit's cherry lips gaped open in disbelief. "A long journey." Yao Hua's jaw dropped to the floor, making a clang sound. "The world is so big. I want to go out and explore." Yin Nuoxing blinked and smiled cheerfully. Jin Wang and the others sighed. Young people were indeed full of vitality. It seemed that they, the old men, could go back and drink tea and grow plants. "Yao Hua, how about we go together? The 12 of you can go out together to gain experience. At least you'll have companions on the road." Jin Wang rubbed his chin and said to them. The other elders also nodded in agreement. As soon as he said that, the faces of the young elites instantly turned pale. Even Yin Nuoxing's face darkened. Didn't that mean that she would have to remain a woman? No. If she explained, she would be treated as a pervert. Divine King, let's just forget about it. The Light Temple still needs us. Yusin and the others have lofty ambitions. We commoners can't afford it, Yao Hua said in a trembling voice. The other 9 people also looked at Jin Wang, waiting for his answer. You all have to go out and train anyway. Isn't it the same wherever you go? Jin Wang continued. I can't do it. Please have mercy, your majesty. Then, do as you wish. You should decide your own matters. Jin Wang scratched his head helplessly. Seeing that they all wanted to die, he didn't want to force them. Phew! Everyone heaved a sigh of relief and wiped away the cold sweat on their foreheads. Those who survived a great disaster were destined for good fortune. Is it that exaggerated? Jin Wang rolled his eyes when he saw their exhausted looks. Everyone laughed dryly and didn't say anything. However, they were muttering in their hearts, what kind of joke is this? From Taiyuan region to Divine Prefecture to Ganyuan region. Damn it, that would take hundreds of thousands of years to fly. Even from here to Xingming City, it would take tens of thousands of years without any effort. Oh my, our skin is so soft and tender. Who knows when we'll be skinned alive? Look at you guys. Yusin is younger than you, but she dares to roam the world alone. It seems that we've been too kind to you. The future 9 kings of Divine Prefecture still need to be trained. Since you don't want to go out and train, then go back and wait for the hellish training. Jin Wang frowned and said sternly, No. The 7 people knelt and screamed. In the distance, golden and brown lights appeared on the horizon and rushed into the courtyard. Seeing everyone kneeling, they couldn't help but be stunned. They quickly asked, Big brother, what's wrong with you guys? Oh, Jining, you're back. You could tell them all at once. Just now, they heard that they're going to undergo hellish training after returning to the temple. They're so happy that they can't even stand properly. Jin Wang looked at the golden figure and said casually. In an instant, the pretty girl called Jining also turned pale. The brown figure beside her also trembled violently. His resolute face instantly collapsed, and he nodded with a sad face. How is this happiness? Yao Hua stood up trembling. His face was even paler than his white clothes. He smiled bitterly and said, We're so excited that we can't stand up. The 2 of them met up with Yin Nuoxing and chatted for a while. They said that the goddess of Taiyuan lived up to her name, and they knew each other. After the first round, Yin Nuoxing planned to leave. With her current strength, it seemed that she couldn't find anyone who could withstand a blow from the heavenly halberd. These young elites had some ability, but no matter how they fought, they couldn't compete with the goddess of Taiyuan, who had several divine artifacts. That night, at everyone's request, Yin Nuoxing became a sparring partner. As soon as she went on stage, she took out her 4 divine artifacts: the heavenly halberd, the divine light mirror, the golden chain, and the divine sunbow. Everyone instantly lost their temper. This freak, 4 divine artifacts. How were they supposed to fight her? No matter how many of them went up, it wouldn't be enough. Then they looked at Jin Wang and the other 2. They were raising their cups to the moon, chatting about old times, raising their cups to the sky, lowering their heads to watch others get beaten up. You're doing this on purpose, right? The 9 elites roared at the sky. From the looks of it, they already knew. However, Yin Nuoxing didn't use too much strength. She directly activated the array and used an endless stream of small attacks to slowly grind it down. The 4 elements of light, fire, metal, and wood came out together. It really allowed them to have a good time. The soft screams and the dozen or so elders outside chatted and laughed. The scene was quite comical, until late at night when everyone was lying on the ground and didn't even want to move their fingers. Yin Nuoxing finally stopped. She waved her hand and threw out a pile of immortal-grade Xian crystals. After blinding everyone's eyes, she activated the energy-gathering array and let everyone gradually recover. She also recovered the huge amount of energy she had consumed. At this time, Yuan also came over with Ming and absorbed the huge amount of energy inside. When everyone woke up and finished circulating their Xian Qi, they opened their eyes and saw a huge, colorful light cocoon. They couldn't help but widen their eyes and quickly call the elders over. Ascension. Jin Wang recognized this state at a glance. Seeing that everyone was at a loss, he explained. After hearing this, everyone clicked their tongues. They didn't know how she obtained this lost secret technique. The elites didn't know, but Jin Wang and the others had a guess. After thinking that Yin Nuoxing might be related to someone, they felt relieved. It didn't take long to spin a cocoon to advance a small realm. In less than an hour, Yin Nuoxing walked out of the light cocoon. Her cultivation had reached the first level of the mortal level, the 12th revolution. However, Yuan also woke up at the same time. Then, she crazily absorbed the energy in the array. The obstacles to her advancement were instantly destroyed. She jumped to the second level of the mortal level. The elites watching coughed. It seemed like they were still too inexperienced. They had been growing up leisurely in a greenhouse. If they weren't careful, they would really be surpassed. Didn't I already say that I have a monstrous talent? Yuan smiled coquettishly as she rubbed Yin Nuoxing's head. She laughed so hard that her body shook. Yin Nuoxing glanced at her. Under everyone's shocked gazes, she took out a green celestial spirit leaf that contained endless vitality. It was the size of a palm. She was about to slap it on her head when Yuan stopped her. Celestial spirit leaf. Could it be that you were really the one who auctioned the leaf at Constellation City? Yao Hua and the others stared at the leaf for a long time. They only came back to their senses after a long time. Yin Nuoxing spread her hands and nodded in tacit agreement. Everyone smiled bitterly at the sight. I thought you guys guessed it? Yin Nuoxing looked at everyone in surprise and said innocently. Everyone's eyes darkened as they swallowed back a mouthful of blood. Chapter 60. The next day, there was still the second round of the competition. Although Yin Nuoxing had dealt with a portion of the people yesterday, she had planned to leave after she had dealt with all of them. Therefore, she was forced to participate in the competition today. After half a day, everyone knew that the goddess of Taiyuan had come to the competition. Although everyone was talking about how powerful and awesome the goddess was as a young hero of the same generation, none of them were willing to submit to anyone. They were arrogant and looked down on everything as if they were the best in the world. Those who had witnessed it yesterday shook their heads. It seemed that many people would have to leave the competition lying on the ground today. The second day of the competition was also a huge battle royale. Every round of the competition had 100 people remaining. At this moment, close to 2,000 people were on the stage at the same time. That kind of vast momentum made the central arena, which was 3,000 feet wide, seem a little small. As the voice said, "Begin," almost 80% of the people in the competition. Instantly, they pounced on Yin Nuoxing and the others like wolves and tigers. Although they didn't believe in superstition, they knew how powerful the light element was. Therefore, they chose to gang up on them. The 9 people from Yao Hua turned pale when they saw that. If they each received a punch, they wouldn't even know how they died, right? Yin Nuoxing was also very straightforward. The divine mirror of light shot out at once, releasing a golden light that enveloped the area within 100 feet, blocking all the attacks. Then, in the next moment, a dark green light spread out from under his feet. The energy of heaven and earth became violent, the power of the stars descended, and the energy of the dragon veins became chaotic. The 10,000 spirits killing array, which was tens of thousands of feet long, was directly activated. Dozens of divine weapons were set up, and the majestic energy blasted everyone out of the arena in an instant. The world was deathly still, and the surroundings were silent. A strange atmosphere pervaded this world. Everyone looked at the array that was flickering with green light and dissipating. Then, they looked at the dozens of divine artifacts that had been standing there for a long time. Immediately, the major forces in the spectator stands were scared out of their wits. Even the judges silently noted down the names of the people who had been sent flying. They looked as if they had not seen anything and were only here to record the results. This girl is too extravagant. She used a forbidden killing array to deal with these small fries. I'll go. Jin Wang helplessly looked at the remaining 10 people and smiled bitterly. That was a killing array that could cause harm to gods and underworld gods. It wouldn't be a problem to deal with him. Wasn't it too extravagant to use it to beat these small fries? It was like using an imperial sword to cut pork. As for the people in the audience seats, those who had seen Yin Nuoxing's methods in the 12th venue were secretly laughing. They had already said that this group of people was overestimating themselves and wanted to gang up on her. They were purely masochistic and asking to be humiliated. The others were dumbfounded. Was he really that powerful? 2,000 people were instantly taken down. Such a difference. Some of the heroes were disheartened, some were unconvinced, and some flew into a rage out of humiliation. For them to be able to reach this stage, which one of them wasn't extremely talented, they had grown up under the praises of the crowd. However, the setback they had suffered today had shattered their beautiful dreams. It was so shattered that it was impossible to put them back together. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, Goddess Taiyuan didn't even look at any of them. This was a form of contempt, a form of contempt, a form of contempt. However, they were still defeated under the group attack. They were defeated very thoroughly and completely. She didn't even have to make any extra moves. Defense, attack. They were all annihilated. It happened in an instant, and they were sent flying. If this was a real situation, they would have already died. However, unwillingness was unwillingness. Anger was anger. Since they had gone out, it meant that they had lost. They didn't have any right to stand in this place. The stage belonged to that perfect and beautiful girl. The light she emitted made the world dim. I already said that the competition is boring. The stakes are boring, the battles are boring, and the results are boring. Yin Nuoxing sighed. Her eyes were filled with pity as she looked at the heroes who were dragging their bodies out of the arena. She didn't bother to hide her low voice. When the heroes who were walking out heard this, their bodies trembled. They had the urge to cut Yin Nuoxing into 1,000 pieces. However, after some consideration, they quickly killed this thought before it rushed to their heads. If they really rushed forward, they would really be asking for a slap in the face. Now that they already wanted to die, there was no need for others to do anything. The young heroes competition started with a perfect plan, but it ended in a dramatic fashion. It happened so fast that it dazzled everyone. Although the competition wasn't very formal to begin with, the appearance of a loophole in the competition made the entire process seem to have collapsed even faster. And the name of Taiyuan Goddess Uxin was also quickly spread out. With the strength of a single person, she slaughtered all the participants. On this day, almost everyone in Star Luo City heard this breathtaking, shocking, and fascinating name, even though it was just an alias. However, Yin Nuoxing didn't intend to let her real name spread across the world. For some reason, she didn't know. She was only 17 or 18 years old. She was supposed to be full of youthful vigor and heroism, but she felt like she had seen through the vicissitudes of life. She felt like she had experienced all kinds of things in life. She felt like she had done everything and was just short of dying. Of course, this kind of posture had never appeared before. She only felt this way in noisy situations. Yu Yin patted Yin Nuoxing's head and smiled gently as she said, "However, I'm still an extremely arrogant, a little silly, a little dumb, a little cute, a little pretty, a little high up in the sky, a little star that needs to be cherished. Big brother is actually a little dumb." Ming grabbed Yin Nuoxing's hair and smiled foolishly. "Yin Nuoxing, who's the little star you've been talking about?" Jin Wang, Mu Ling, and the others asked curiously. "That's the one." Yu Yin pinched Yin Nuoxing's face and smiled. Everyone was confused. Those who didn't know the inside story could only be confused bystanders. "All right, let's stop here. It's time for our journey to begin. If we have time, we'll be guests at the shrine." Looking at the boundless mountain range in the distance, Yin Nuoxing, Uxin turned her head and looked at everyone. She smiled sweetly for the first time, causing the hearts of the 5 youths to shrink for a moment. However, they quickly calmed down. "Little sister Uxin, remember to come to my divine, which shrine to play." Mu Ling stepped forward and hugged her gently with a smile. "And the fire god shrine." Huiji also hugged her and smiled faintly. The only place I won't go is the light god shrine." Yin Nuoxing glanced at Yao Hua, who had a smile on his face and wanted to say something, and said faintly. Everyone was stunned and secretly laughed. "Poor Yao Hua, He was rejected just like that. It looked like Yin Nuashing really didn't like him that much. What did I do wrong? Yao Hua looked up to the sky and howled with a sad face. Tilting her head, Yin Nuashing sighed and said in a flat voice, "A cocky fart will always be a cocky fart. He can never see his own past. His brain's neural circuit is probably a straight path that only allows light elements to pass through without any turns." Yao Hua smiled bitterly. "Child, be careful on the road. If you're tired, come to my divine wood shrine to rest." The beautiful woman patted Yin Nuashing's head and smiled gently. Nodding, Yin Nuashing and the other two slowly retreated and waved their hands. They took one last look and smiled faintly. Light elements surged, and the three figures instantly disappeared. They rushed into the boundless sky, leaving behind a sound that was like the sound of nature reverberating in the air. "See you later." Mu Ling and the others also waved their hands. Although they had only known each other for 3 days, they had a good impression of each other and had a good impression of each other. It was just a little regretful that they had to part ways not long after knowing each other. The first friend I made in my life is gone just like that. I don't know when I'll be able to see each other again. Huiji put down his hand sadly and sighed. "Oh, I told you to go together. You didn't want to go, and now you're regretting it. What's the use?" Jin Wang rolled his eyes and ridiculed. That the journey is too long. The 9 people smiled embarrassedly and unnaturally looked away. If they really went with them, it wouldn't be a simple acquaintance anymore. Moreover, the journey was too long, and they weren't used to it yet. It was better to obediently return to the shrine and play around. "Oh, speaking of which, your journey to hell will take 10 years. If you can't reach the 5th level of the immortal realm, just wait." Jin Wang rubbed his chin and suddenly said, No, we'll die." The 9 people's wails were earth-shattering. Little Xin has gone to sleep. Little Star is back. Looking at the blue and red light surging on her pretty face and the enchanting face gradually returning to its arrogant and handsome face, Yuan smiled and also changed her appearance back to her original appearance. "I guess I won't be using the identity of Yin Nuashing for a long time." Yin Nuashing sighed and touched her face, feeling a little nostalgic. It had only been 10 days, but it felt like Yin Nuashing had been gone for 10 years. If this situation happened a few more times, her mentality would probably become distorted. Big Brother is back. In Yin Nuashing's embrace, Ming Ming cried out excitedly. His little mouth smacked a kiss on Yin Nuashing's face, causing Yin Nuashing to blush a little. Yuan covered her mouth and laughed for a while. After an instant, her pretty face changed dramatically, and she pulled Yin Nuashing to a stop and hurriedly said, "Where's the Netherworld Ruin Sword? It doesn't seem to be back yet." Yin Nuashing obviously knew, but she wasn't nervous. She pulled up her sleeve, and the purplish-black sword mark on her forearm was still there, and it was slightly brighter. Yin Nuashing smiled and said, "The Netherworld Ruin Sword is fine, so it should be fine. It said that it would leave for a while and will definitely come back, so it definitely won't leave on its own. Moreover, it's connected to my mind, so I can use this to locate it and can appear at any time. For now, I'll just let it wait by itself. Who knows, it might have something to do. This, all right." Yuan nodded. Since he said it was fine, then it should be fine. Maybe it doesn't want me to rely on it so much. Yin Nuashing smiled and took out the sun god bow. He enlarged it to 1,000 feet long and let it float in front of him. He smiled at Yuan and said, "Let's use the sun god bow as a means of transportation." Yuan rolled her eyes at him and sat down at the center of the sun god bow. Then, she pulled Yin Nuashing over and hugged him like a pillow. She went asleep, and Ming directly burrowed into his windbreaker. Her little head leaned against his chest, and she also fell asleep. Yin Nuashing smiled and shook his head. He controlled the sun god bow and flew forward, like a sunbird streaking across the sky, leaving behind a golden streak of light. Chapter 61. A long journey, an endless journey. Perhaps this was the best evaluation of them. Ordinary people would never be able to reach the other side in their entire lives. The road ahead was unknown. Everything was mysterious. In the distant horizon, a golden light that was hundreds of meters long streaked across. It disappeared in a flash, leaving behind a faint golden light as it disappeared from sight. On the golden bough, Yuen looked at the retreating forest below in boredom. She looked at Yin Nuoshing and asked, "What plans do you have for the future?" Yin Nuoshing tilted her head, thought for a while, and said, Other than traveling to Xingming City, I have to look for the soul fragments of the nether void sword that are scattered around the world. I have to look for materials to forge weapons, search for my memories, find my origins, and find Ming's family." "Big brother." Ming raised his head. His pure purple eyes stared at Yin Nuoshing with some displeasure. He looked a little resentful, as if he had been abandoned by him. "Ming, be good. After all, you have your family. You could decide what to do after you find them." Yin Nuoshing sighed and rubbed Ming's head. She smiled gently. Ming lowered his head and mumbled. His little head leaned against Yin Nuoshing's chest and didn't say anything. "You said you're looking for your origins. The only clue you have is an incomparably huge ancient tree. Is there nothing else?" Yuen lowered her head and thought for a while before asking. "No. The only other clue is that voice that I can't hear clearly. I don't know about the rest. My memories are too fragmented. There's nothing I can do. If there are any natural wonders that can awaken my memories, I can look for them. Natural wonders that can awaken memories." Yuen frowned and thought for a long time. She raised her head and looked at Yin Nuoshing. She said, "I only know 2 kinds of natural wonders that can awaken memories. Do you have any ideas?" Yin Nuoshing's eyes lit up as she asked hurriedly. "Yes, but they're all very famous things. Even if we can find them, we might not be able to get them." Yuen sighed. Mei Mao turned around and said slowly, "The divine soul fruit and the life flower." "Divine soul fruit? A lifetime of flowers?" Yin Nuoshing murmured and repeated it. Then she frowned and looked confused. It seemed that she had never heard of it before. The god soul fruit is said to be able to restore a damaged soul to its original state. As for amnesia, it's either due to a short circuit in the brain, causing the person to be unable to recall things for a while, or due to the original soul being shattered and not being able to reform, causing it to dissipate. Only a part of the original soul remains. Yuen nodded. If it's a short circuit in the brain, then it's still fine. A slap from me will probably be able to reconnect it. But you said that someone has looked at your situation before. It seems like it can't be awakened, right? Yes, when I was still in Xingling City 2 years ago, I saw it once. It was said that there was basically no hope of restoring it. Yin Nuoshing nodded and said, "Then it can only be the second situation." Yuen allowed a sigh. Her brows furrowed even deeper as she said in a deep voice, "Your origin soul might be incomplete, or it might have been shattered in the past. The remaining bits condensed and formed your current consciousness. Therefore, your memories have also dissipated along with the other fragments of your soul. Since it's all dissipated, doesn't that mean it can never be restored?" Yin Nuoshing was a little anxious when he heard this. He had never thought about the dissipation of his original soul. He didn't even know if he had one or several original souls. That's why it's said that the god's soul fruit can completely restore a soul. Even if it's incomplete, it can still restore it to a complete state. Yuen rolled her eyes at him and said, "God's soul fruit." Yin Nuoshing nodded and continued to ask, "What about the other kind?" "The lifetime flower, as its name suggests, contains a person's entire life. The conditions and place of its birth are unknown. It's so unknown that it makes people wonder if such a thing really exists." Yuen thought for a while and continued. "It's said that this flower can allow a person to see the past and present life clearly. Of course, in this life, they can only see the present when they're alive. Past and present life, is there really such a thing as reincarnation?" Yin Nuoshing was puzzled. Who knows? It would be too unbelievable if there is such a thing. However, I still believe that there is such a thing. After all, it's not strange for anything to happen in this world. What do you think? Yuen nodded and said rather convincingly, "Me?" Yin Nuoshing was stunned. After a while, she said, "I believe it. However, no matter if it's my past or present life, I'm still me." I'm still me in my past life, and I'm still me in this life. How does he know this, little brat? Ewing looked at him in surprise for a while, then patted his head out of habit. Is there a description of where these two things grow? Yin Nuashing stuck out her tongue and smiled. The god's soul fruit is easy. It's ranked 55th on the Treasure of Heaven and Earth treasure ranking. It's easy to find clues with its name and surname. As for the lifetime flower, I've never even heard of it. Whether it really exists or not, I don't know who put it on the 40th spot. Ewing pursed her lips and said unconcernedly, the so-called Treasure of Heaven and Earth treasure ranking. I don't know who came up with it, what kind of standards it uses, what kind of symbols it uses. Not many people know about it, but everyone knows that it exists. Yin Nuashing looked up at the sky and said slowly, Treasure of Heaven and Earth treasure ranking, Divine weapon ranking, Divine beast ranking, Alchemy cauldron ranking, Divine flame ranking, Devil thunder ranking. Yu-Yin counted with her slender fingers one by one. In the end, she even scolded. Who the hell likes to make a ranking for everything in the world? Did he have nothing better to do than to have nothing better to do? Or do they have obsessive-compulsive disorder? Let's not bother about the lifetime flower for now. We could try to find the god's soul fruit. After all, there's news of its appearance. We should be able to find it by following some clues. Yu-Yin said slowly as she habitually leaned on Yin Nuashing's shoulder. Brother, Ming is hungry. After the two ended their conversation, Ming, who had been sleeping, suddenly woke up. She rubbed her little head against Yin Nuashing's chest and said softly, Then let's go find something to eat first. Yin Nuashing patted Ming's head and smiled. With a thought, she slowed down the sun god bow and landed directly in a mountain range. In a mountain range, wisps of smoke rose. A large piece of golden, oily meat was skewered on a blue bonfire. The oil dripped onto the flames, making sizzling sounds. The aroma permeated the air, and a faint white mist rose from the meat. Yin Nuashing flipped the branches and let the meat roast evenly. Then, she threw a pile of herbs, a large piece of meat, and a bone into the cauldron at the side. Blue flames rose from her palm, and a big pot of stew was made. You used the cauldron to make soup. That cauldron is worth 30 million. 30 million. Ewing propped up her fishing rod at the side. She was dumbfounded as she watched Yin Nuashing use the bronze cauldron as a soup pot. Her heart instantly ached. I didn't even say anything when you used a divine-level weapon to fish. Yin Nuashing raised her head and looked at the golden chain on the fishing rod. Her face trembled. What the hell was she planning to catch that she needed to use a golden chain? TSK, don't you know how to use materials locally? Ewing stuck out her tongue. Then, she looked at the blue flame and said, Little star, when will you find a fire seed for me? You have already changed to a blue flame. Help me find one too. Yin Nuashing's blue flame was taken from the stomach of a demon whale. It was swallowed by a demon whale when they were flying over a small sea. The two of them saw this blue flame in its stomach before they escaped, so they took it while they were at it. I'll change it for you when I find one. She shrugged. Yin Nuashing faintly smiled. Although this magic whale flame wasn't as strong as the flames on the divine flame list, it was still much stronger than the flames formed by ordinary fire elements. This could be seen from how Yin Tian was instantly killed during the competition, when fighting against the same element. Due to the fact that they were of the same element, the damage would more or less be reduced. Ming sat on a cushion at the side. Her purple eyes stared at the various delicacies. She couldn't help but swallow her saliva and lick her lips with her pink tongue. Just wait a little longer. Yin Nuashing couldn't help but laugh when she saw her expression. Ming nodded. She hugged her knees with both hands and looked around with her big eyes. Splash! More food, more food. Grilled silver, shark, demon fish. Yu-Yin fiercely pulled the fishing rod upwards, and a several-meter-long silver-white fish with shark fins was pulled out of the water. Then, with a slap, it fainted and fell to the ground, making a boom sound. Yin Nuashing was speechless as she looked at the demon fish. She silently grabbed it and scraped off the scales. After a long while, another red-hot fish was added to the blue flames. Yin Nuashing suddenly stopped what she was doing. She raised another pile of blue flames. Then, she took out the 1-meter-tall stone egg and threw it into the flames to roast. Are you planning to eat the roasted stone egg? Ewing glanced at it with a smile. Yin Nuashing, come. Try this grilled azure ice wolf meat, grilled demon fish, and stewed earth dragon medicinal herbs. She took a piece of meat that was roasted to a golden color and placed it on a silver plate. Then, she cut it into small pieces and placed it in front of Ming. Then, she put down a bowl of steaming hot soup. There were pieces of meat and a few medicinal herbs floating in the soup. What are you going to do with the rest? Nina asked as she took the silver plate from Yin Nuashing. She pointed at the pile behind her with Mei Mao and asked, One piece will be grilled, one piece will be steamed, one piece will be stir-fried, and one piece will be braised. Then, we'll bury the corpses. It's decided then. In the distance, there were 2 corpses of demon beasts that were at least 10 meters long. Blood was still flowing down their bodies, dyeing the grass red. Of course, Yin Nuashing was going to treat them as food. No soul essence, no crystal core, sigh. Yuin sighed regretfully. Where did you find those medicinal herbs? She took a sip of the hot soup and asked as she looked at the pile of medicinal herbs floating in the cauldron. Yin Nuashing pointed at a place and said, in the mountains. They're the natural treasure ground that's rich in energy. I accidentally ran in there and saw it. I don't know how many years it's been growing, but the energy is very rich. I picked a few medicinal herbs and brought them back to make soup. Big brother, open your mouth. While the two were talking, Ming ran over. He stood on his tiptoes and extended a piece of meat from his fork towards Yin Nuashing with a sweet smile. Yin Nuashing bent down and ate the piece of meat. Then, she took out a towel and wiped Ming's oily mouth with a smile. Come, little star, you spun Mei Mao around and imitated Ming. She forked a piece of meat and waved it in front of Yin Nuashing. Yin Nuashing was a little embarrassed. After hesitating for a while, she still took a bite of the meat with a red face. She quickly looked to the side and didn't look at Yu Yin's expression. Little star, you're still a little brat. Yu Yin pursed her lips and smiled. Then, she pinched Yin Nuashing's embarrassed face. Yin Nuashing. Chapter 62. Little star, haven't we reached that place yet? In the dense forest, 2 figures were slowly advancing on the deformed mountain path. Their bodies brushed past the leaves, producing rustling sounds. Deep in the forest, there were occasional beastly roars that echoed from afar. Yu Yin, who was being dragged behind, looked around and saw a stretch of lush greenery. Finally, she could not help but grumble. They had already been walking for 2 hours. We just had our fill. Treat it as a stroll to prevent us from gaining weight. After taking a deep breath, Yin Nuashing used her aura to push aside the leaves. She carried Ming in her arms with one hand and dragged Yu Yin forward with the other. I'm slender. I'm not afraid of gaining weight. Yu Yin mumbled as she rolled her eyes. All right, we're almost there. Look, Ming didn't even make a fuss. You have said that at least 10 times. Yu Yin raged. Mei Mao looked angrily at Yin Nuashing and said aggrievedly, Besides, Ming is being carried by you. He doesn't have to walk by himself, sigh. Yin Nuashing sighed helplessly and shrugged. Who told you to not be Ming? How can you blame me for not being able to carry him? Scratching her head, Yin Nuashing used her other hand to hold Yu Yin's slender hand. Light elements surged as her body trembled slightly and instantly vanished from her spot. This was a fiery red world. The surrounding trees were dark red in color. A faint scarlet mist lingered in the forest. The surrounding space had a sense of distortion as though the temperature was extremely high. The fiery red trees suddenly emitted rustling sounds as 2 figures darted out and gently landed on the ground. Their eyes suffused a strange look as they sized up the place. What rich fire elements! Even the air has a layer of mist condensed from energy. It's in no way inferior to the results of Fire Cloud Palace's many years of operation. Just as they landed, Yu Yin took a deep breath. Her beautiful face suffused a red glow as she revealed an intoxicated expression. This place has a natural terrain that seems to attract the surrounding energy in the valley. Furthermore, most of it is fire elemental energy. Cultivating here should yield twice the results with half the effort. Yin Nuashing nodded. She found this place fascinating the first time she came. She had the same feeling when she looked at it again, but she couldn't tell what was odd about it. There are so many herbs here. After a moment of intoxication, she looked around for a long time and couldn't help but lick her rosy lips as she said with a naughty smile. The small valley was no more than 100 feet wide and was surrounded by mountain peaks, forming a small basin. The only way to enter was through the winding and rugged path that they had just come from. The concealment was very high. Perhaps this was the reason why the small valley could grow so quietly. Isolated from the outside world, even some magical beasts might not be able to find this place. Moreover, looking from above, it would be obscured by the dense energy fog. It was simply a natural concealment point. Don't be too ruthless. Leave some chance for reproduction. Seeing the excitement on Yu Yin's face, Yin Nuashing helplessly reminded her. Of course, he knew that this fellow had seen how prosperous this place was and wanted to uproot this valley. I know. Yu Yin curled her lips, then directly jumped into the pile of grass. She carefully and slowly plucked a stalk of medicinal herb and placed it into the jade box that she carried with her. Seeing her happily plucking the herbs, Yin Nuashing shook his head and walked slowly to the other side. He didn't thoroughly explore this place when he first came. He just casually plucked some herbs and left. This time, he could take a closer look. Big brother, there's someone there. When he walked to the other side of the valley, Ming suddenly tugged on Yin Nuashing's clothes and pointed to a bush in front of him. After being stunned for a moment, Yin Nuashing looked in that direction. His soul energy silently surged out and completely enveloped that area. He sensed a weak aura. It was very weak, and its life force was gradually draining away, causing the already weak aura to gradually decline. It was probably injured and fell here. After hesitating for a moment, Yin Nuashing took out his heavenly halberd and carefully walked towards that place. He used his heavenly halberd to pry open a gap in the bush and stretched his neck to look inside. He was stunned when he saw a figure. It was a young man. His clothes were torn and tattered, revealing large areas of his skin that had been cut by sharp tools. The wounds were charred black, and it seemed like he was injured by someone with the fire element. His fair face was a little thin, but he was rather handsome. A wound as thick as a forearm extended diagonally from his neck to his waist. His internal organs could faintly be seen. His chest rose and fell slightly, and it seemed like he was still breathing. Every time the young man breathed, his internal organs would move, and a large pool of sticky blood would spurt out. The smell of blood filled the air, making Yin Nuashing feel a little disgusted. He quickly covered his mouth and coughed dryly. Who is this person? How did he get injured to this extent? Yin Nuashing frowned when he saw the huge wound that cut across half of the young man's body. The blood that spurted out covered the area around the young man. With so much blood flowing out, an ordinary person would have died long ago. However, he was still alive. After hesitating for a moment, he hurriedly dragged this person out. Wood element flowed out from his palms and covered the huge wound. However, it encountered an extremely strong aura that prevented his wood element from coming into contact with the wound. The remnant aura is already so strong. I really don't know what cultivation level his opponent is at. Feeling the strange movement from the wound, Yin Nuashing frowned. He took the halberd from his side and held it with both hands. He placed it a few inches away from the young man's body, and wood element flowed out once again. This time, the wood element that was tainted by the divine weapon was not obstructed. It easily landed on the wound, and bits of vitality flowed out. Then, the wound that was constantly spurting blood actually stopped. The blood that flowed out blocked the huge wound and slowly solidified. After stopping the bleeding casually, Yin Nuashing heaved a sigh of relief. He took out a large pile of bandages from his pendant and looked at the young man strangely. He suddenly pulled the bandages with both hands, and the white bandages danced in the air After a while, he looked at the young man who was wrapped in bandages and nodded in satisfaction. He then took out a red medicinal pill from his pendant and stuffed it into the young man's mouth, not caring what it was used for. Then he released his aura and lifted the young man up. Then he brought it back to where he came from. Little star, this person, Yuin, who was digging happily in the grass, saw Yin Nuashing bring back a big dumpling. She was so shocked that she jumped up and asked in surprise. Yin Nuashing spread his hands and explained. Little Xing Xing. After Yuin finished listening, she stretched out her flawless jade-like fingers and flicked his forehead, causing him to be filled with depression and confusion. It's nothing. Seeing the confused look on Zhang Xian's face, Yuin shook her head. She didn't say anything else. Looking at the young man lying on the ground, wrapped up like a mummy, she muttered to herself, let's hope that this person isn't an ingrate. After Yuin ransacked the valley, the young man still did not wake up. Yin Nuashing, who was very principled, decided to wait for a while and save him until the end. We will leave when he wakes up. Yuin sighed when she heard this. She still did not say anything. However, in the small valley, under the premise of not being discovered by Yin Nuashing, she secretly set up some spell formations in case of emergencies. If that fellow woke up and vented his anger on them first, they would have a way to deal with it. The ice-blue moon climbed up to the sky and sprinkled traces of cool moonlight on the world. A thin layer of silver gauze enveloped the world and decorated the small valley in silver. The combination of blue and red dyed the forest a gorgeous purple. The green light lingered and slowly dimmed. Yin Nuashing withdrew the wood element and looked at the young man who still did not wake up. He got up and walked to the side. He looked at the purple forest and then at the night sky hidden in the fog. Under the night sky, the purple forest appeared mysterious and luxurious. There was a hint of intoxication in his eyes. He liked purple. Just as Yin Nuashing was staring blankly at the sky, a clear voice that was filled with confusion suddenly sounded behind him. Yin Nuashing was slightly happy when she heard the startled murmur. She hugged Ming, who was sleeping in her arms, a little tighter. She turned around and gently walked in front of the confused young man. She smiled faintly and said, "You're awake. I'm still alive." The young man looked blankly at the sky and muttered to himself. It seemed that he had not regained his senses yet. Yes, I lost. I was knocked down from the sky. Recalling the scene before he fainted, the young man held his head and clenched his teeth in pain. After a long while, he touched the bandages on his body. Then, he looked at Yin Nuashing in astonishment and said, "It was you who saved me?" Yin Nuashing nodded. The young man looked at her deeply. He did not say anything and sat up with difficulty. Blue water elements surged on the surface of his body and enveloped him. The surging water elements made the air much more moist. Yin Nuashing was shocked. She quickly took a few steps back and did not stand too close to the young man. The young man did not release any aura when he was healing his injuries. However, the majestic water elements that circled around him like a water dragon gave him an indescribable sense of oppression. It was difficult for him to breathe when he stood too close to the young man. Yuin frowned deeply. Her figure appeared on the other side of the mangrove forest. Some small magic formations quietly surged into the void. The fiery red spear in her hand appeared to be very sharp under the moonlight. The young man only stopped circulating his energy after midnight. There was some color on his pale face. The hideous wounds on his body had also begun to heal. His breathing was calm. He stood up. A light flashed in his hand and a blue robe appeared. He gently draped it over his body. Then, he turned around and looked at Yin Nuashing. "Child, don't be nervous. You saved me. I don't mean any harm." The young man spoke slowly. However, his first sentence stunned Yin Nuashing for a moment. After she reacted, she knew that this person must be an old monster who had lived for an unknown period of time. "My name is Ihai. This old man will remember the favor of saving my life today. Now, I still have some things to deal with. When we meet again in the future, I will repay this young friend's kindness." The young man named Ihai cupped his hands and spoke politely to Yin Nuashing. Then, with a wave of his sleeve, an azure jade tablet flew directly to Yin Nuashing. It gently landed in front of him and fell into his palm. This old man will leave first. We will definitely meet again in the future. He smiled slightly. The tip of his foot tapped on the ground and rushed toward the horizon. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the horizon. Yin Nuashing looked at He, who was flying away quickly, then looked at Yin, who was walking out of the forest, and then looked at the cold jade token lying on his palm. There was a big word Yi written on it, and it looked like a dragon was flying and a phoenix was dancing. It was quite charming. Strange fellow, Yin muttered as she picked up the jade tablet and looked at it. Then she casually threw the jade tablet to Yin Nuashing without saying anything. Why do I feel like you're angry? After casually putting away the jade tablet, Yin Nuashing carefully looked at Yin. Her pretty face was clearly filled with anger. Yin glanced at her and snorted softly. Mei Mao was a little unhappy. However, Yin Nuashing didn't know how she had offended her. She immediately smiled awkwardly and said, Big sister, aren't you going to sleep? I'm going to sleep, but there are still some things that I have to settle first. Yin opened her red lips and walked over quickly. She pinched Yin Nuashing's face and ruthlessly ravaged it. Then, she scolded her at the speed of light. Little star, can't you at least be more careful? You're now traveling and seeing the various forms of life. You're not out to save lives and heal the injured. Your overflowing compassion might not necessarily bring you any benefits. You have to know that there are always more bad people than good people in this world. Even a small matter can cause the so-called good people to become black-hearted and black-hearted. The person you saved this time didn't do anything, but there's no guarantee that the person you save won't be an ingrate next time. You have to put your own safety first. Do you know that? Yin Nuashing was stunned when she heard that string of words. However, she couldn't help but laugh. After all this time, it turns out that she was worried about me. But I was only doing things within a safe range. Even if he really attacked me, I could still escape with you. Also, Yin Nuashing smiled. She raised her head and stared unblinkingly at Yin with her pitch-black eyes. Then, she said with a smile, I didn't do anything wrong. TSK. Yin rolled her eyes. Chapter 63. After sending off He, this strange person, the small valley also calmed down. The energy from the outside world continuously flowed into this small place. Yin Nuashing and the others stayed here for half a month. One day, he turned into an energy cocoon and was fiercely struck by the heavenly tribulation several times. He completely refined the power of the heavenly tribulation and absorbed most of the energy stored in the small valley. Even hot air became a bit cool. Only then did he break out of the cocoon and advance to the second level of the mortal realm. The 6 pitch-black wings on his back extended to 5 meters. Surging wind elements crazily rushed towards the wings, and a hurricane actually blew up on the flat ground of the small valley. Looking at the wide wings, Yin Nuashing said, He really became a birdman. I don't think so. I think he's quite beautiful, like an angel. Yin walked over to Yin Nuashing's side with light steps. She squatted down and picked up a black feather with a smile. Those with wings aren't necessarily angels. They can also be birdmen. She curled her lips and couldn't help but say this. Then she said, Even if he's an angel, he's still a fallen angel. His wings are all black. Well, it's fine as long as I think he looks good. Yin smiled sweetly as she stroked the soft wings with her lily-white hands. Big brother is an angel now. Ming, who was in Yin's arms, also touched the black wings and said excitedly. His big purple eyes flashed with light. Yin laughed until her whole body trembled. Yin Nuashing. After Yin Nuashing successfully advanced to the second level of the mortal realm, the two ransacked the small valley. They didn't linger any longer and jumped onto the sun god bow, turned into a ray of light, and flew into the distance. The 1-month journey was peaceful. They were very lucky to find a city, but it didn't seem very big and there weren't many people. The 3 of them strolled around the city, mainly to try their luck and see if they could find Ming's family. Then they ate and drank in a restaurant and found some information. The three of them rested in the city for a night and slept in the next day. Then they set off together. This time, they weren't heading east, but southeast. I didn't expect that a small city like this would have another piece of information instead of getting any information about the divine soul fruit. On the sun god bow, Yuen opened the map she had just obtained, identified it against the sun, and then pointed out a direction. The capital of weapons, Divine Weapon City. It is said that it is the largest weapon-centered city in the entire Taiyuan region. It has collected countless weapons-related materials. Yin Nuoxing also smiled. It just so happened that he planned to strengthen all his weapons. Also, he could find a pile of materials to improve the Nether Void Sword until it was good. The only thing is that it's impossible. The Taiyuan region is so big that it would take hundreds of thousands of years for light to cross the entire region. It's really not strange that there would be something in such a large terrain. Although it is known as the #1 city in the Taiyuan region, I believe that there must be other places like it. It's just that it's not famous and no one knows about it. Is it that big? Hearing the exaggerated number, Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. Obviously, he didn't believe it. There are many mineral veins around Divine Weapon City. You can find countless ores to forge weapons. It's normal for it to be prosperous. Do we have to go mining? Yin Nuoxing raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, "Don't you know how to buy?" Yuen rolled her eyes at him and said slowly, "Of course there are ores that have already been dug out. We just have to buy them. Of course, you can also go down and mine. Who knows, you might find something unexpected. More importantly," at this point, Yuen looked at Yin Nuoxing, whose eyes were shining, and said helplessly, "You want to go down to the mines to have fun, right?" Yin Nuoxing scratched his head in embarrassment and twisted his body. He smiled and said, "Don't say it so clearly. I've never gone down to the mines before. I'm just going down to have fun. Okay? Big, sister." As he spoke, he shook Yin's jade-like arm. His voice was so sweet that it was sickeningly sweet. "Yuen, when you're done with your business, Big Sister will take you down to the mines to have fun." Although there was a layer of goosebumps on her arm, Yuen still nodded in agreement. In an instant, Yin Nuoxing was so happy that she couldn't help but mutter, "Still a little brat." The distance between the two cities wasn't far, but the few of them walked for a full 2 months. That was because when Yin Nuoxing heard that they could go down to the mines that day, she directly drilled into the ground and opened her evil spirit eye to see the underground clearly. However, some of the stones that seemed to be good stuff were actually useless stones. Of course, occasionally, there would be a small piece of passable low-grade forging stone. Although it was only the size of a fist, it made Yin Nuoxing happy for a long time. Yuen couldn't help but call her a little brat. If there was a first time, there would naturally be a second time. Although they obtained some low-grade forging stones, they also let Yin Nuoxing taste some sweetness. However, after all, she wasn't a professional. She didn't know how to look for or veins and didn't know how to find the terrain. In fact, she was just fooling around. After playing like this for half a month, Yuen sighed and pulled him out of the ground with a slap. Then, she gave him a knock on the head and told him to focus on the road. After a month of hurrying, in the distant horizon, a dark shadow was slowly climbing up. Yin Nuoxing opened her eyes and ended her cultivation state. She sighed and looked at the prehistoric beast in front of her. She muttered, "We're finally here. My bones are about to collapse from sitting. Little brats are so weak. It's only been a month." Yuen lay down and turned to a more comfortable position. "Then move your head away from my knees," Yin Nuoxing murmured as she looked down at Yuen. "Don't." Yuen stuck out her tongue. After saying that, she directly pressed her charming face against his waist. "Big brother." Ming tugged on Yin Nuoxing's lapel and murmured in a dreamy voice, "Hey Ming, you're awake?" Yin Nuoxing lowered his head and stroked her little face with a smile. Then he closed his large wings slightly and covered the 2 girls who were using him as a pillow. "A down quilt, so comfortable," Yuen murmured in a comfortable voice as she pulled a wing over her body. Yin Nuoxing, as they got closer, the towering pitch-black city wall also gradually enlarged. It was extremely eye-catching in the boundless forest. The city wall was about 10,000 feet tall and was completely black in color. Faint cold air lingered around it, and it strangely reflected a piercing cold light under the sunlight. There were no signs of polishing, and it seemed to be cast from a huge rock. It looked extremely sturdy and solid, as if it were gilded. Let's go down. You can't fly within a 100-mile radius of Divine Weapon City. That energy barrier was left behind by the god back then, the weapon god. It contains a trace of divine energy, and if you fly in the air, you'll be subjected to an increasingly powerful pressure. Only gods can withstand it. It's used as a defense, and it's indestructible. Yu propped herself up and said. Yin Nuashing nodded and controlled the sun god Bao to descend slowly. Currently, on a hillside, he was looking at the towering black city wall from afar. There was a trace of amazement in his eyes. This divine weapon city was really generous. Black Blaze Stone contains a rich fire element. Due to its mutation, it counters the water element and can even reflect part of the energy of an attack. It's too extravagant to use such a huge piece to cast the city wall. The two of them sighed. Black Blaze Stone was the best choice for forging weapons. It could be used to upgrade a 5th grade weapon to the 6th grade, or to forge a 6th grade weapon. It was hard to get even with 10,000 gold, but here, an entire piece was used to build the city wall. We'll be rich after knocking off a few pieces. Yin Nuashing sighed softly and looked down at the foot of the mountain. There were ferocious-looking people shuttling back and forth in front of the city gate. She couldn't help but feel curious. There didn't seem to be many people hiding their aura in this place. Were they brazenly trying to fight? Yuan suddenly slapped her forehead and looked at those ferocious-looking people with a strange expression. She said softly, because the things produced in this place are very valuable. It has created a very special environment. What? It's very chaotic here. They use their fists to do the talking. Yuan sighed and said, Fight. Stunned for a moment, Yin Nuashing looked at the city gate again. Those people who entered the city didn't hide their murderous aura and seemed to want to kill anyone they saw. Yes, the power in this city is the Divine Weapon Pavilion, which is essentially the same as the Sacred Weapon Divine Palace. They mainly rely on weapons and control the entire Divine Weapon City. After we enter the city, we will avoid them if we have nothing to do. When they see good weapons on other people, it's as if they have eaten aphrodisiac. They will use any means to snatch them. Little star, you should keep those divine weapons on you first. What a vivid description. Yin Nuashing spread out his hands. He had more than one divine weapon on him, and the people of the Divine Weapon Pavilion had a special method to sense high-grade weapons. He reckoned that this journey wouldn't be very peaceful. Let's go. We'll be fine if we're careful. When we see people with a sword emblem on their robes, we'll take a detour. Yuan waved her hand and pulled him down the mountain. After walking down the mountain for some distance, the huge city wall appeared in front of Yin Nuashing's eyes. Outside the city gate, there was a long line of people. Noisy noises could be heard everywhere, like the sound of demons. Looking at those big men with bare arms and scars all over their bodies, all huddled together with dazzling weapons, Yin Nuashing and Yuan frowned at the same time. The former hated crowds the most, while the latter was a clean freak. This kind of place was simply a forbidden area for them. Hey, that lady is really beautiful. It's been a long time since we've seen such exquisite goods here. Do you see the little girl on that little brat? What a strong spirituality. Her foundation must be very good. Maybe if she can be refined into a weapon, she will definitely be able to sell for a good price. TSK. Your Divine Weapon Pavilion always wants to refine everything into a weapon. What a waste. Just as Yin Nuashing scanned the situation at the city gate and was considering whether to charge in, a few obscene laughter with ill intentions suddenly pierced into her ears. Retracting her gaze from the city wall, Yin Nuashing looked at the place where the laughter came from. She saw a dozen big men clustered together. The person in the middle was wearing a gray robe with a lifelike black sword embroidered on his chest. The laughter came from them. Their obscene gazes continuously swept over Yu Yin's exquisite body and Ming's body. Hearing these voices, the people in the queue also turned their heads and looked at Yin Nuoxing and the others. A burst of laughter also erupted. In this kind of boring waiting, being able to see a beauty that could topple a country being teased could be considered a way to pass the time. Damn, who's a little brat? Damn it, if you keep looking, I'll dig your eyes out. Yin Nuoxing and Mingyu roared in their hearts at the same time. However, there was no movement on the surface. They only sighed. Was it really so chaotic? Yin Nuoxing did not charge forward and start a massacre like the others had expected. Instead, she sighed and led Yu Yin to the side. Haha. The surrounding people let out disdainful laughter when they saw this action. This place was extremely chaotic. The one with the bigger fist was the truth. If they did not do anything about this kind of humiliation, they would only be ridiculed by others. Bastard. Those big men were stunned for a moment when they saw Yin Nuoxing's action, after which they put down the weapons in their hands and laughed wildly as they cursed. Yin Nuoxing suddenly paused. She tilted her head and looked at them. Her pitch-black eyes that contained a golden light slightly narrowed. The corners of her mouth pulled into a strange arc. She extended her hand and gently snapped her fingers under the amused gazes of the crowd. Ta! Boom! Following a light sound, a blue pillar of fire that was 10 zhang tall shot up into the sky from under the feet of the burly men. The air instantly became as hot as an oven, and the scorching temperature burned the clothes of the people near to it into ashes. The blue light shone on everyone's lifeless faces, and they all shuddered violently. With a walala sound, they hastily retreated, leaving behind an empty space. The pillar of fire dissipated, leaving behind a bottomless hole that was 10 feet in size. The dozen or so big men had disappeared without a trace. Many people regained their senses and looked at Yin Nuoxing, who was smiling motionlessly. They suddenly felt a chill in their hearts. You guys are laughing very happily. Yin Nuoxing grinned. Her white teeth looked extremely cold. She gently raised her left hand and pressed her middle finger and thumb together, making a finger-snapping action. When the crowd saw this scene, they all cried out in fear. All of them fled in all directions as if their lives depended on it. In their eyes, this young man's smile was simply the smile of a devil. They had already marked him as a dangerous person in their hearts. It's much quieter now. Yin Nuoxing smiled faintly and touched her face with her hand that was making a finger-snapping action. She looked at the empty city gate and pulled Yu Yin in under the fearful gazes of the crowd. Then she disappeared. Chapter 64. Little Star, when did you become a cold-blooded killer? Yu Yin tilted her head and asked in the pitch-black passageway. She still remembered that when they were in the Wei family, Yin Nuoxing wanted to kill the head of the family, but was unable to do so. She could only knock him unconscious. I don't know. Shaking his head, Yin Nuoxing sighed. Perhaps it's not that I'm afraid, but that I don't want to. However, after hearing the words today, I feel a little displeased. You killed them subconsciously? Yu Yin sighed as she rubbed her head. Although being soft-hearted was useless in such a chaotic place, and might even harm herself, she did not want this little star, who had always been a little silly and cute, to have his hands stained with blood one day. When she thought of this, she could not help but wonder if they had come to the wrong place. Yin Nuoxing did not say anything. She gently nodded her head. There was a look of reluctance and unhappiness on her face. However, Yu Yin, who saw this scene, heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that little star would not change so easily. After walking out of the somewhat dark passageway through the city gate, the dazzling sunlight poured down from the sky. The bustling noise came from all directions, causing Yin Nuoxing to stagger a little. Yin Nuoxing narrowed her eyes and slowly raised her head. She looked at the huge inner city that appeared in front of her, as well as the crowds of people walking shoulder to shoulder on the wide streets. She could not help but shiver. The scale of this divine weapon city was not much smaller than Star Luo City. In fact, from a certain point of view, Star Luo City could not be compared to this place. This was because there were things that Star Luo City might not have. Moreover, the wilderness northwest of Divine Weapon City was the heart that maintained this city. There was a huge mineral vein there, and precious materials were unearthed from there every day. Should we find a hotel or something like that? Yu Yin's gaze swept around. She softly asked, "Let's find a place to rest first. This time, we will probably have to stay in the city for a while." Yin Nuoxing thought for a while and said, perhaps this was really a city with weapons as the main theme. Along the way, there were many blacksmith shops on the left and right sides of the street. Red flames flickered, accompanied by the sonorous sound of hammering, one after another. These blacksmith shops all had 3 rooms, and the passers-by would not only stop to look at the high-quality weapons placed by the counters, but they would also admire the blacksmiths wielding their hammers like the wind. Blacksmiths were a rather special profession. They could not refine miraculous medicinal pills like alchemists, nor could they inscribe powerful talismans like curse masters. However, blacksmiths could create eye-catching and heart-moving weapons one after another. They could bestow spirituality to weapons, and even more so, for example, the weapons on the divine weapons ranking. The blacksmiths had attached a soul to them and became living beings. When one was in danger in the wild, the only thing one could trust was the weapon in one's hand. Rather than entrusting one's hopes to something else, it was better to grab hold of the weapon in one's hand and kill a way out. This was also the reason why precious weapons were in high demand. Of course, there was a prerequisite to becoming a blacksmith, and that was the existence of metal elements in one's body. Only with metal elements could one precisely control a piece of metal and let it be reborn in the furnace and turn into a weapon. Of course, the advancement of a weapon also had to be carried out by the blacksmith. Ordinary people could not control the pieces of material well. If they were rash, they might cause the energy contained in the weapon to go berserk and cause the weapon to self-destruct. That kind of power was extremely harmful to people who were unprepared. Yu Yin retracted her gaze from the blacksmith shop, where sparks were flying everywhere. She looked at Yin Nuoxing and said hopefully, "Little star, you also have metal elements. You should also be able to become a blacksmith, right?" "Can I? I don't know until I try." Yin Nuoxing tilted her head and looked at the fiery red pieces of metal as she said with uncertainty, "Go and give it a try. If you can start with all 3 professions." Yu Yin said with a smile as she imagined Yin Nuoxing wearing a white headscarf with blue flames in her left hand and a hammer in her right hand. Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. Now that she thought about it, it seemed to be true. Fire and metal elements corresponded to alchemists, and he could only comprehend half of it. Metal elements corresponded to blacksmiths, and any of the purest elements corresponded to talisman masters, and so on. She couldn't possibly ask him to dabble in all of them, right? "This can be done," Yin Nuoxing replied with a nod. "Hee. In that case, you go find a hotel first. I'll go out for a bit." Yu Yin patted Yin Nuoxing's shoulder and ran out with a smile. Wait, it's such a dangerous place." Yin Nuoxing stretched out her hand and was about to chase after her, but her face was covered in dust. "Don't act alone." She didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she said the rest of her sentence. Yin Nuoxing's mouth was wide open. When did she become so fast? Yin Nuoxing shook her head. She knew Yu Yin's temperament. Perhaps no one here could do anything to her. So, she sighed and obediently went to find a hotel. If Yu Yin was busy and he didn't find a place to stay, it would be too unreasonable. And now, he had Ming with him. She hurriedly found a hotel in the center of the city that looked good. It looked grand and prosperous. There were many large and small blacksmith shops around it, as well as 1 or 2 large restaurants. She immediately went in and asked for a top-notch room and stayed there. The room was very spacious, and it had no problem accommodating dozens of people. There were also several large training rooms. The unique layout made Yin Nuoxing click her tongue in admiration. Yin Nuoxing carefully placed Ming on the bed. The little girl had been sleeping all this time and was rarely awake. She was supposed to be growing with boundless vitality, but for some reason, she had been sleeping all day. This made Yin Nuoxing feel strange. but he couldn't see anything wrong with her. "Brother." Ming's little mouth moved as if she was calling out softly. Yin Nuoxing curiously put his ear to her mouth. When he heard her calling out to him, he couldn't help but be stunned. "Ming." Yin Nuoxing shook her gently, but Ming didn't wake up. Her little mouth kept repeating the two words, which made Yin Nuoxing feel very strange. He placed his palm on Ming's forehead, and his soul flowed into her mind through his arm. The little girl should be dreaming, but there was no fluctuation in her soul at all. Instead, the strong soul power made Yin Nuoxing feel stunned for a long time. This power was not much weaker than his soul that was nourished by the four elements. His soul carefully withdrew, and when he opened his evil spirit eyes for a while, he still couldn't see anything. Yin Nuoxing sighed, grabbed the blanket at the side, and covered Ming with it. He patted her little head with his palm, tidied up her loose purple hair, and looked at her quietly. "Little star." Suddenly, the door was kicked open, and Yu'in rushed in with a smile. She looked at the shocked Yin Nuoxing, waved her hand, and threw down a pile of books, which were piled up to the height of a person. Then she smiled and said, "Some of the important things and learning content for blacksmiths are all here. Take your time to read." Yin Nuoxing's eyes widened, and he looked up from the floor until he was at eye level. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood. "Cough, cough. I didn't expect it to be so abnormal. Let's not learn it, okay?" Yin Nuoxing covered his chest and coughed twice. He looked at Yu'in and tried to negotiate. "No, fine, let's talk." Yu'in snorted. She put her hands on her slender waist, raised her eyebrows, and said one word at a time. No." Yin Nuoxing looked up to the sky and roared. Although he was forced to read a lot of books, Yin Nuoxing didn't really resist. After all, he was also interested, and reading books wasn't a big deal. It was just that this amount was a little too much. When the sun disappeared below the horizon, Yin Nuoxing trembled as he put down the pile of books and slowly climbed into bed. He kept muttering, "My head is going to explode. I'm going to sleep for a while." He had finished reading a large pile of books in half a day. He had gained a lot, but he needed to organize them. If he could comprehend them properly and practice his craft, he could be considered a blacksmith. Of course, if he were to become a beginner blacksmith, he would not be able to do so. Yu'in propped herself up on the bed and looked at Yin Nuoxing, who was lying behind Ming like a dead dog. She sighed and touched her bulging stomach. After thinking for a while, she didn't wake him up. She lifted the blanket and covered the three of them. Then she also fell asleep. They had been together for some time, and the two of them didn't really care about this. After all, they were brother and sister in name, so it wasn't a big deal. When night fell and the red moon announced its domination of the world, the streets were lit up. Yin Nuoxing slowly woke up and looked at the pitch-black room. He released his elemental energy and spread some fluorescent light throughout the room. It looked warm and peaceful. Yu'in gently shook Yin Nuoxing awake and held her stomach with an aggrieved expression. She looked at Yin Nuoxing with watery maimao. Her pitiful look made Yin Nuoxing quiver. He quickly pulled her and carried Ming to the restaurant next to the inn. "How was it? Did you learn anything?" At the dining table, the two of them were eating heartily. Yu'in raised her head and didn't forget to say something. Then she buried her head and ate. "It's okay. Now, we need to find a place to buy some materials to practice. If there are no problems with the theory, I think I could try to forge." Yin Nuoxing took a sip of tea and smiled. After taking the handkerchief Yin Nuoxing handed over and casually wiping her mouth, Yu'in chuckled and said, "The materials are easy to find. There are so many blacksmith shops here. You could just go to any one of them and buy them. Anyway, we have a lot of money." "Okay." Yin Nuoxing nodded. After the two of them had eaten their fill, they were about to get up and leave the table. However, just as they stood up, they saw the hall not far away suddenly become chaotic. They saw a large group of burly men with malicious expressions walking toward them aggressively. Frowning slightly, Yin Nuoxing's eyes swept across the clothes of the burly men. When she saw a black face pointing to the sky on their chests, she was stunned for a moment. It seemed like these were the people from the Divine Weapon Pavilion, the power of the Divine Weapon City. The person she killed at the city gate also wore such clothes. Looks like they've come knocking on our door. Yun took a sip of tea and said lazily. Yin Nuashing nodded calmly. Since they had already come knocking on their door, there was no hurry to leave. Although the title of the city's overlord was a little scary, there was no need to retreat. With the means he had now, as long as they were not gods above the god underworld level, he would have the means to deal with them. Thinking of this, she slowly sat down under the surprised gazes of the crowd. Her gaze did not even look at the burly men who were rushing toward her. This group of burly men who came with ill intentions naturally attracted the attention of many people in the hall. Immediately, there were many exclamations of surprise. It's actually the people from the Divine Weapon Pavilion. There are people who live with weapons all day long. I didn't expect even Qi Lian to come. It seems that not long ago, Divine Weapon City made an exception and took him in as an inner disciple from the outer pavilion. He seems to be a member of the Qi family. Now, he already has the strength of mortal level 6. The people from a Divine Weapon Pavilion are all people who don't care about their lives. I don't know how that young man offended them. I'm afraid he's going to suffer today. Under the attentive gazes of the crowd, the group of bare-chested, burly men who were filled with a fiendish aura finally arrived in front of the table, where Yun Nuashing and the other two were sitting like a pack of bloodthirsty wolves. Bang! A large leg that was the size of a tree trunk swung over violently and directly kicked the table in front of the three people apart. As wood chips flew everywhere, the young man with a longsword tattoo on his neck, who seemed a little sinister, swept his gaze over Yun Nuashing like a knife. His cold, bone-chilling voice resounded in the area. "Little bastard, you're the one who killed the people of my Divine Weapon Pavilion at the city gate?" Chapter 65. The table exploded and wood shavings flew in all directions. Yun Nuashing's eyelids twitched, but the teacup in his hand did not ripple at all. After taking a sip of tea, Yun Nuashing raised his head and glanced at the ferocious young man. He yawned and said indifferently, "Your mouth is too smelly. If you die, so be it." Seeing that Yun Nuashing had actually admitted to it, the surrounding onlookers were very surprised. After thinking for a while, they thought that this young man either had some huge backing behind him, or he was not someone to be trifled with. After all, he could not be a fool to say such a thing in such a situation. Hearing Yun Nuashing's words, the ferocity in the eyes of the burly men instantly increased. The shiny weapons in their hands were ready to be bloodthirsty at any time. It seemed that as long as the young man gave the order, they would turn into hungry wolves and tear the former into pieces. "Brat, good. You are fierce and arrogant enough. Since you know that he is from the Divine Weapon Pavilion, you still dare to attack. Don't you want to stay in the Divine Weapon City anymore?" The young man narrowed his eyes, and his voice became colder. After finishing his tea in one gulp, Yun Nuashing raised his head and said indifferently, "I have just arrived here and do not know what the Divine Weapon Pavilion is. But even if I did, what did I say just now? If he dies, so be it." As soon as Yun Nuashing finished speaking, the faces of the crowd twitched violently. This young man was really audacious. As an outsider, he did not know how to restrain himself. Did he not know that the Divine Weapon Pavilion controlled the entire Weapon City? If he offended them, he would either be thrown out or be sent out lying down. The veins on the young man's forehead twitched violently. He forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart and stared coldly at Yun Nuashing. He wanted to see if there were any special markings on his body. There's no need to look for him. He's just a rogue cultivator. Yun Nuashing stretched his back and smiled as he ridiculed. He naturally felt the young man's gaze. Boom! Almost at the same time, the young man's killing intent swelled to the extreme. A powerful aura surged out in all directions. His right hand formed a fist and smashed towards Yun Nuashing's head with a ferocious wind. When the crowd saw that Qi Lian attacked without any hesitation, they couldn't help but exclaim. In the face of Qi Lian's sudden attack, Yun Nuashing raised her head and clenched her right hand into a fist. A red talisman floated above her fist, and then lightly collided with Qi Lian's fist. A low explosion sounded, and the power of the talisman instantly exploded, multiplying Yun Nuoxing's strength by several times and hitting Qi Lian's fist one after another. The moment the two fists collided, Qi Lian's figure was sent flying. He crashed through a few huge stone pillars and fell to the ground, motionless. On the other hand, the chair that Yun Nuoxing was sitting on exploded, but she only took 2 or 3 steps back. Could this young man also be an immortal step expert? Such a short exchange caused everyone to be astonished. Since he was able to blast Qi Lian flying with a single punch, his strength was presumably not lower than Qi Lian's. Immortal stage? After withdrawing his fist, Yun Nuoxing retracted his arm in pain. A faint, ethereal aura wrapped around his hand, causing him to feel a sharp pain all over his body. That talisman wasn't really drawn, but came with the fist technique that he learned. Collapsing Fist was a growth-type fist technique with a short to medium attack range. There were 10 amplification talismans attached to it. When it was mastered and the 10 talismans were connected, the attack power could be increased by 100 times. It mainly relied on physical strength. The soreness in his arm affected all the nerves in his body. He couldn't help but tremble a few times, but he forced himself not to show it. He only looked at his palm with some horror. The 4 elements in his body were constantly tempering his body. Although it didn't change much, as the saying goes, many little drops make an ocean. Moreover, he had experienced 2 heavenly tribulations, and all the pure energy was used to temper his body. It could be said that Yun Nuoxing's current physical strength was very powerful. Coupled with the talismans of Collapsing Fist, which multiplied his strength by several times, who could be a match for him in the same realm? Yun Nuoxing and Qi Lian were an entire realm apart, but the latter's ending wasn't as good as imagined. An immortal step expert was sent flying with a single punch against a mortal step expert. If this were to spread, he would probably be laughed to death. Struggling to stand up, Qi Lian's face was full of shock. He also didn't expect that with Yun Nuoxing's age, his strength was actually not below his. One must know that his actual age was definitely much older than what he looked like on the surface. However, they didn't expect that Yun Nuoxing wasn't as powerful as she looked. She was just forcefully enduring it. I'm really F***ed up. Shivering, Qi Lian felt as if a basin of ice water had been poured over him. His whole body was cold. Looking at his subordinates, he suspected that even if he rushed up, they wouldn't be enough to kill her. Previously, when he heard the news, he wanted to seek justice as a member of the Divine Weapon Pavilion, but he didn't expect to kick an iron plate. The surrounding gazes made Qi Lian feel as if he was sitting on pins and needles. His face turned pale and dark. Thoughts raced in his mind. After a moment, he completely restrained his aura. Facing Yun Nuoxing, he cupped his fist and said in a deep voice, "I'm not as skilled as you. I admit defeat. This grudge is over." After saying that, he waved his hand and left with his men. Yun Nuoxing looked indifferently at those burly men retreating in a sorry state. She slowly lowered her trembling hand and turned her arm over to take a look. However, she saw that the veins on her arm were bulging like angry dragons. Her fist was flushed red. It was very terrifying. "Little star, you." Seeing Yun Nuoxing's forced appearance, Yuen opened her cherry mouth in surprise. She was full of disbelief and hurriedly brought Ming to another seat. Calm down, calm down. There's no problem." Yun Nuoxing shook her head stiffly. She smiled bitterly and retracted her arm back into her sleeve. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to use this hand for a while. Pulling out a chair and sitting down, Yun Nuoxing spread her hands helplessly and said with a bitter smile, "I didn't expect that this quiet person was actually an immortal step expert. If it wasn't for my amazing bones, no, my strong physique, that punch would have broken my arm. It hurts." Taking the teacup that Yuen handed over, Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly as she watched the tea tremble and ripple. Fortunately, that big guy didn't continue to be so persistent. He left. "What should we do next time?" Yuen tilted her head and said with a smile, "If he comes looking for trouble again, what do you plan to do?" Let's wait and see. Yin Nuashing scratched her forehead in distress. For the first time, she felt that it was troublesome to provoke a force. Let's settle everything as soon as possible. Once we leave Divine Weapon City, they won't be able to do anything. Yu nodded. The two of them didn't stay any longer. They got up and walked out of the restaurant. Right now, there were still a lot of things to do. After leaving the restaurant, Yun Nuashing casually grabbed a person and asked him. Then, she and Yu ran directly to the largest shop in the city, leaving that person behind to look at them in confusion. This brat, is he an outsider? He doesn't even know where the Wanshi shop is. Arriving at the Wanshi shop in the center of the city, Yun Nuashing raised her head and looked at the so-called shop. Her face trembled. How was this a shop? It was a palace. It was at least 100 feet tall and emitted an icy blue light. It exuded a cool aura. On the top of the palace, there were 3 big words that clearly marked this building. Wanshi shop. This was the largest stone shop in Divine Weapon City, and it had quite a reputation in the city. At the entrance, there was a huge stream of people coming and going, shoulder to shoulder. It was as if they were going to crush the door. Noisy shouting and cursing intertwined together and continuously sounded out. Seeing that some people jumped to the side and started fighting because of the crowd, Yin Nuashing and Yu couldn't help but shake their heads. On their way here, they had already seen more than 100 of such incidents. It was really chaotic. Standing in front of the Wanshi shop, Yin Nuashing hesitated for a moment. She slightly tightened her grip on Ming's hand. Then, with Yu, she entered the crowd and released a faint yuan power. It was as if she was cutting open a river. She quietly and gently pushed away the people blocking her way. Then, the two of them easily entered the Wanshi shop. Once they entered the Wanshi shop, the noise gradually disappeared like a receding tide. A metallic smell unique to ores pounced on their faces, causing Yun Nuashing to wrinkle her nose. He rubbed his nose as he surveyed his surroundings. This incomparably spacious hall was filled with many transparent counters. A dazzling array of ores was placed on the counters. At this very moment, there were quite a number of people standing in front of the counters. The hall was divided into 2 areas, the ores area and the weapons area. Compared to the ores that emitted a metallic smell, more people liked to go to the weapons area. Compared to the metal lumps that couldn't be handled, the finished products were more tempting. However, for a blacksmith, the materials were sometimes more important than the finished products. After all, as long as they had the materials, they could naturally forge a weapon. Ice flame stone, chalky earth, or nether iron, gold, origin stone. Yun Nuashing's gaze swept across the rows of counters. She racked her brains and tried hard to recall the information she read in the book in the afternoon. Then, she compared them and identified them. Although these things were placed casually, they were still considered quite precious ores. They could be used from a 1st to the 3rd rank. For a newbie like Yin Nuashing, they were already quite good materials. Seeing the price tag below the counter, Yin Nuashing slapped her mouth and didn't let her scream out loud. After buying the ores, you still have to buy the metals. Blacksmiths, oh blacksmiths, this is simply a money-burning profession. Alchemists were poor for 3 generations, while blacksmiths were ruined for a lifetime. Yuen stuck out her tongue. Just as she was about to speak, a soft laugh came from the side. Dear customers, what kind of ores are you looking for? Our Wanshi shop is one of the best stone shops in the Divine Weapon City. I'm sure you can find what you want. Raising her head, Yun Nuashing looked at an old man who had appeared at the counter. She didn't beat around the bush and directly said, I'd like to trouble you to give me 100 kilograms of fire-attributed ores and metals from the 1st to the 4th rank. When the old man heard this, his gaze swept over Yun Nuashing, and he nodded. He kept taking out piles of stones from the counter and piled them up on the table like a small mountain. Yun Nuashing thought for a moment, then took out a piece of white paper from her pendant and wrote down 3 names. These were for her to use to strengthen the Netherworld Ruin Sword to the 8th rank in the future. Although she hadn't touched on that field yet, it wasn't a bad thing to be prepared early. Heaven Burning Stone, Earth Core Rock, Devil Flame Iron. The old man put the piles of ores and metals into a black ring. Then, he took the white paper from Yun Nuashing and glanced at it. His eyebrows instantly knitted together. The rarity of these items was not inferior to a demigod-ranked weapon. Even the Wansher shop could only sigh helplessly. Hearing the old man's reply, Yun Nuashing immediately lowered her head. Why is it that every time I buy something, there's nothing? What happened to being able to find what I want? She took out a purple gold card from her pendant and spent nearly 10 million. Under the old man's smiling gaze, she slowly walked out of the Wansher shop with the pain in her heart. She ran back to the inn like a wisp of smoke and anxiously said something to Yu-in before diving into the forging room. Chapter 66. In the dark room, a few faint lights shone in through the window, adding some light to the room. The layout of the room was very simple. There was a long iron bed, a huge oven, and a bellows beside it. A large anvil stood beside it, and a cooling furnace. It was the standard layout of a blacksmith shop. As Yun Nuashing's fingers gently brushed across these large iron lumps, cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Although he knew a lot from reading books and knew what these things were, they were still theories. Now that he had to turn these theories into practice, he was a little dumbfounded. He picked up a hammer that weighed 100 pounds on the anvil and swung it. This bit of weight was nothing to Yun Nuashing, but he was afraid that he would use too much strength when forging later. The theoretical knowledge kept replaying in his mind, evolving into images, then reorganizing, linking, and replaying. After repeating this cycle for a long time, Yun Nuashing took a deep breath, threw a bunch of things on the iron bed, and took the white headscarf. In the end, he was stunned. He coughed dryly, grabbed the white headscarf, pushed open the door, and jogged to Yu-in, who was lying on the bed, almost asleep. He handed the headscarf to her without saying a word. Seeing Yun Nuashing suddenly come out of the forging room, Yu-in was stunned for a moment. When she saw him handing the headscarf over and saw his dazed expression, she immediately understood something. She giggled and said, little star." Kneeling on the bed, she pulled Yun Nuashing to the bedside and pressed him to sit down. She took the white headscarf and fiddled with his long hair for a while before tying the headscarf on. She looked at him for a while, smiled, and patted Yun Nuashing's head. Then she lay down. She had a long ponytail that hung down to her waist, and her sleeves were rolled up. She wore a white headscarf on her head and held a hammer in her hand. She looked like a model master. Of course, that was if you ignored her twitching face. It looked like she had no confidence at all. Shaking his head, he took a deep breath and flipped his palm. A blue flame rose from his hand, and he threw it into the furnace. When the temperature rose to a certain degree, he sucked a piece of black metal through the air. He pulled the bellows with all his might, and the blue flames danced in the furnace like fairies. He threw the piece of metal into the furnace, and his mind controlled the temperature of the blue flames. However, he forgot that the power of the blue flames was much stronger than ordinary fire elemental flames. Therefore, the piece of metal directly turned into ashes with a poof. Blowing a whistle, he threw the ashes out of the furnace. There was not the slightest fluctuation in his heart. After all, this was the first time he had tried it. No matter how strong one's talent was, they still needed to have the opportunity to practice it. Failure was nothing. Taking a deep breath, Yun Nuashing sucked another piece of metal and threw it into the furnace. The blue flames rose and surrounded the piece of metal. However, this time, Yun Nuashing was trying her best to suppress the temperature. At this moment, the temperature of the flames was only that of ordinary flames. She controlled the temperature of the blue flames and carefully heated the piece of metal. Then, she controlled the piece of metal to toss and turn in the flames. When the piece of metal was completely red, she took it out and suspended it on the anvil. Tilting her head and thinking for a while, Yun Nuashing decided to forge it into a sword. The metal elements in her body surged out and condensed into a silver-white ball the size of a head beside her. Strands extended out and wrapped around the red-hot piece of metal, pulling it thin and long to form the basic shape of a sword. Holding the iron hammer in her right hand, she hammered the slender front end of the sword at an angle. The iron hammer rose and fell with the sound of metal striking. The metal elements kept controlling the stretching of the sword body, flattening the increased thickness due to the hammering. Finally, at the end of the sword, she used the dense metal elements to condense a hilt. Then, she took out the blue flames and lightly burned the sword to maintain its red-hot state. The iron hammer kept hammering on the sword body and flipping the sword body so that the thickness on both sides was uniform. When the embryonic form of the sword was formed, she threw it into the furnace. To put it simply, normalizing the fire was to put the steel back into the forge and reheat it. Then, he would draw traces of metal elements and draw small magic circles inside the iron sword. However, he was still unable to draw the cause and effect, nor could he attach a spirit to the weapon. At present, he could only forge a dead weapon, without consciousness, spirituality, or spirit. In the dark room, the blue flames shone on the handsome face covered in sweat, elongating his shadow and projecting it on the wall. She used the metal elements to polish the sword slightly, smoothing out the uneven parts. Finally, she used the metal and 3 other elements to condense a small core in the center of the sword. Then, she used the metal elements to connect the core and the small array that was drawn, weaving some auxiliary charms on the surface. Then, she controlled the blue flames in the furnace to gradually calm down. The iron sword was thrown into the water trough at the side, making a chi-chi sound. White smoke rose and steam rose. After waiting for the sword to completely cool down, Yin Nuoxing reached out to grab the hilt and took the sword out of the water. She looked at it carefully and waved it a few times. Then she smiled and said, "Good sword." Then she threw the sword into the furnace. The crisp sound of fingers snapping echoed. Blue flames rose and swallowed the sword in one gulp, leaving behind a pile of ashes, as if, in the end, compared to the normal forging method, this was only an additional step of molding the weapon's core. Maybe the real finished product wouldn't be as good as the swords made by some experienced blacksmiths. So tired, sitting on the iron bed, Yin Nuoxing stretched her waist lazily. Looking at the pile of materials, she couldn't help but sigh. The power of a normal first-tier weapon wasn't as strong as the energy weapon condensed from her own origin energy and elements. Even if it was a little higher, it wouldn't be as strong as a magic tool created with her divine sense. Although it wasn't good to say this, the truth was that unless the weapon was created with a very high level and had been tempered thousands of times and strengthened with countless ores, it would be difficult for it to surpass a magic tool of the same level. Refining a small normal weapon is already dog-tired. She sighed. She really didn't know who created those high-level weapons. Of course, if the weapon was created to the extreme, it would surpass all magic tools. For example, the weapons on the divine weapons ranking were all created by high-level blacksmiths. They weren't magic tools that were condensed by themselves. Moreover, there wasn't a single magic tool on the divine weapons ranking. From this, it could be seen that a weapon at the peak of the divine weapons ranking was stronger than one's own magic tools. The divine weapons ranking. The divine weapons ranking. I wonder which heaven-defying geniuses created weapons that can crush magic tools of the same level. A long time ago, before magic tools were born, blacksmiths were rampant in the world. It was said that a strange person created 12 earth-shattering divine swords. Now, they were all ranked in the top 12 divine weapons on the divine weapons ranking, divine sword record. Since ancient times, who knew how many eras had passed? Blacksmiths rose and fell. They were reincarnated continuously. How many geniuses in the world, how many forging geniuses, and how many divine weapons were born? However, when all the blacksmiths faced the 12 divine swords, they all shook their heads and sighed. They felt ashamed of their inferiority and couldn't look up to them. Even the divine weapons on the other weapon records couldn't be compared. Until the later generations, when the people from the lower realm brought unique weapons, magic tools, weapons condensed by themselves. This was the beginning of the decline of blacksmiths. Among the same level, magic tools were respected, and there were very few weapons that could restrain them. However, even the magic tools that were popular in an era couldn't jump over that natural chasm. No matter what kind of magic tool was refined by a brilliant person, it was difficult for it to compare to the 12 divine weapons. Even some high-level divine weapons couldn't compare. Therefore, although blacksmiths were declining, they didn't die out. Besides, blacksmiths could also forge armors in addition to weapons. It was just that most blacksmiths were in the former category. Magic tools were measured in the same way as cultivation. The grades of weapons were divided into ordinary cultivation grades, including mortal grade, immortal grade, demon grade, and so on. Only weapons that surpassed the divine grade and were comparable to the divine weapons ranking were qualified to be called divine weapons. Yin Nuoxing found that most of the weapons were weapons. Moreover, magic tools couldn't be strengthened according to the 1st to 12th level. They could only be refined with one's own strength. However, they could be strengthened by forging methods. However, compared to pure weapons, it was much more difficult. The Nether Void Sword, the top weapon on the divine weapons ranking, divine sword record, it has its own consciousness and soul. It is a unique life. It is said that it can take a human form. It has always been in the hands of the blacksmith and is treated like a human, not a weapon, Yin Nuoxing murmured. These were the memories she obtained from the Nether Void Sword. Who is the blacksmith? What does it have to do with me? Did he pass the Nether Void Sword to me? Why? Isn't that its most beloved divine weapon or human? Looking up at the ceiling, Yin Nuoxing was a little confused. The Nether Void Sword is gone now. She raised her right hand. The giant purplish-black sword on her forearm was vivid and lifelike. It emitted a faint light in the dark room. This was proof that the connection between the two still existed. Although she told Yu Yin that it was nothing, she was a little flustered herself. The symbol is still there. This means that nothing happened to the Nether Void Sword. Otherwise, it wouldn't keep flashing. Yin Nuoxing sighed after covering the light with her origin energy. Shaking her head, Yin Nuoxing jumped off the metal bed and took out the sun god bow. Looking at the pile of red, black, blue, and green ores and metals, she smiled. Although strengthening was more difficult than forging, it didn't matter if she failed. At most, the materials would be destroyed, but the weapon itself wouldn't be affected much. Of course, that was relative to low-grade weapons. It's just money anyway. I already know how to forge, so now let me practice how to strengthen weapons. Yin Nuoxing jumped off the metal bed with a smile. Reaching out, she sucked a piece of ore and threw it directly into the furnace. Refining it into a pool of liquid, she then covered the sun god bow with it. Controlling the metal elements, she guided the energy contained in the liquid into the weapon. Then, she spared a bit of her mind to control a wisp of the elements to maintain the small arrays that the weapon originally contained. Then, she guided the newly added energy to cover the arrays, using energy to replace and strengthen them. Although this step consumed a lot of her mind, it was very smooth. It was much easier to deal with compared to those metal lumps that were still in their infancy. Although she was strengthening the arrays on the outside, Yin Nuoxing didn't touch the core of the weapon at the center. That wasn't something she could touch. Strengthening was changing the arrays carved inside the weapon to strengthen or add elemental energy. Advancing was changing the core of the weapon. That was the most dangerous step. The slightest carelessness could destroy the weapon that she had painstakingly forged. If it was light, it would dissipate, and if it was heavy, if the weapon self-destructed, the energy of the sun god bow's explosion was equivalent to an all-out attack from an underworld god powerhouse. If Yin Nuoxing was hit by it, he would definitely turn into ashes. Thinking of this, her hand that was controlling the metal elements couldn't help but tremble a few times. The transparent arrays were gradually dyed with a fiery red color. Fire elemental energy flowed through the entire bow, and the golden sun god bow exuded a faint red color. Wiping away her sweat, Yin Nuoxing looked at the small mountain of materials that was missing by more than half and was a bit speechless. Although it seemed like a very easy thing to do, in the process of strengthening because she was impatient. She had once guided the energy too quickly and caused the arrays to tremble. The energy that seeped in was offset, or the energy that covered it wasn't stable enough and dissipated once again. In this way, she had actually used up more than half of the materials to complete a single strengthening. The additional power was also determined by the energy contained in the materials, so she felt that the gains didn't make up for the losses. Alchemy makes 3 generations poor, forging ruins one's life. Yin Nuoxing muttered, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Damn, all she was burning was money. However, with a good start, the second strengthening naturally wasn't that difficult. After using up all the first-tier materials, the Sky Piercer, Golden Chain, and Divine Light Mirror were all successfully strengthened. As for advancing, Yin Nuoxing planned to try using some low-level weapons. Forget about the artifacts. She didn't want to make the headlines the next day. Thinking of this, Yin Nuoxing wailed again as she dragged her exhausted body and got up, continuing to refine weapons. In the forging room, a bewitching blue flame rose, projecting the shadow of a swinging hammer onto the wall. Chapter 67. The morning sun crossed the horizon and poured down on the ground. The weak sunlight shone through the window and shone on the young man lying on the bed. A cool breeze blew in from the window and blew the young man's long hair. The lazy sunlight fell on the young man's eyelids, and he closed his eyes hard. After a while, he struggled to open his eyes. His dark eyes, which were shining with a golden light, revealed some fatigue and listlessness. After struggling to sit up, Yin Nuoxing held his head and shook it. There was a swelling pain in his head. He sat in a daze for a while. When he came back to his senses, he hugged the soft blanket and buried his head in it. As he smelled the faint fragrance that remained, the pain in his head eased a little. By the looks of it, he seemed to have been carried to the bed, right? Yesterday, he felt that the feeling was quite good, so he took advantage of the opportunity to continue forging. Not only did he successfully advance an iron sword to the 2nd rank, but he also successfully injured himself. Those injuries were caused by the explosion of the weapon's core. Fortunately, his body was strong enough. If it was someone else, it might not be a matter of superficial injuries. However, in the later stages, he was more confident about the requirements for the advancement. Even if he failed, he would not blow up his weapon. This way, he could avoid a lot of losses. All in all, although he was exhausted and collapsed on a metal bed, and he did not know how many weapons he had destroyed, he still gained a lot. He also had considerable experience in the forging of Tier 1 weapons. I can also be considered a 1st-rank blacksmith. No, I should be a 2nd-rank blacksmith, right? Yin Nuoxing smiled faintly. He still remembered the matter of yesterday's weapon advancement, which meant that a Tier 2 weapon had been successfully created by him. It should be considered a Tier 2 weapon. Ah, Big Brother is awake. Just as Yin Nuoxing was feeling complacent, the door was gently pushed open. Yin walked in with Ming, whose purplish-black hair fluttered in the wind. When he saw Yin Nuoxing sitting, Ming jumped on the bed happily and threw himself into his arms. He was so clingy that he refused to get down. Hee, Ming is awake too. Hugging Ming, Yin Nuoxing chuckled. She had been in a deep sleep for a long time, which made her very nervous. Now that she saw Ming wake up, she was naturally overjoyed. Little star, are you feeling better? Yin walked over to the bedside and sat down. She placed her cold hand on Yin Nuoxing's forehead and carefully observed his condition. Better, right? Yin Nuoxing smiled and nodded. Just as she was about to apologize, Yin pressed a finger to her lips. Yin shook her head and sighed. Her voice carried a hint of reprimand as she said, You always do things without a sense of propriety. Why do you have to work so hard? I told you not to rush things if it's not necessary. Did you forget? In the end, he ended up with injuries all over his body and exhausted his soul energy. If he didn't take care of his body, what would he do if he fell sick one day? Cultivators can get sick too. Once he falls sick, it won't be a minor illness for ordinary people. Hearing Yin nagging and reminding him like an older sister, Yin Nuoxing suddenly felt very warm in his heart. The feeling of being cared for by someone was very comfortable. After a while, when Yuin finished talking, Yin Nuashing scratched his head and said with a smile, "I forged a second-tier weapon." Yuin sighed and patted his head. She knew that this idiot who gave her a headache must have suddenly felt that the weapon was extremely good to the touch, so he helped her forge his body. She also knew that he never took care of himself, nor did he take care of his body. At this time, she could only pay more attention to him. Big brother is an idiot. At this moment, Ming suddenly raised his head and looked at Yin Nuashing. He said word by word in a serious and playful manner. Yin Nuashing, yeah, your big brother is a big idiot. Yuin covered her mouth and smiled as she agreed. Yin Nuashing wanted to cry. At this moment, the season seemed a little bleak. The austere autumn wind whistled through the streets. Occasionally, a few red leaves would be swept into the distance by the breeze. The streets were a little cold and cheerless, and there were fewer people. It was not as lively as it was when they first arrived. "It's autumn?" Yin Nuashing said as he looked at the people hurriedly passing by below and took a deep breath of the cool air. "It's autumn. Let's take Ming to buy some clothes," Yuin said with a smile as she stroked Ming's soft long hair. It had been 2 months since they first met Ming. She had been wearing that thin purple dress and had not changed into any other clothes. "Okay." Yin Nuashing smiled and hugged Ming. He patted her head and smiled. He had this idea a long time ago, but he had not done it. He carried Ming and left the hotel with Yuin. They started looking for a tailor shop in Divine Weapon City. However, perhaps it was true. Everything in Divine Weapon City was related to weapons. There were not many ordinary shops. There were accommodation and food, but there were no clothes. He wondered if they did not need to wear clothes. "Big brother, someone is following us." After the two of them walked around for a long time without finding anything, Ming suddenly tugged at Yin Nuashing's collar and whispered to him. Yin Nuashing was startled and called out softly. Then his soul energy quickly merged into the void and slowly extended out. If they were being followed in this situation, he could only think of one possibility. Someone was trying to harm them. "Ming, who is it?" At this time, although there were fewer people than when it was lively, there was still a relatively large flow of people. Therefore, Yin Nuashing did not know who was following them. "He has been following us. He has been following us for a long time," Ming said in a soft voice. She climbed onto Yin Nuashing's shoulder and blinked her big eyes to the back. Then, she carefully shrank back. "Be careful. Don't act rashly." Yuin grabbed Yin Nuashing's arm and reminded him through voice transmission. They still did not know who was following them. If they acted rashly, it was inevitable that they would alert the enemy. Nodding, Yin Nuashing also understood this principle. He looked around and locked his gaze on the black city wall that towered into the clouds. The corners of his mouth curled up. He said something to Yuin and walked toward the city wall. He slowly walked around a few streets and walked to the city gate. Along the way, he casually bought some things and pretended to be out for a stroll. Finally, he walked out of the city gate and went into the forest not far away. He felt an aura behind him slowly leave the group and follow him. Russell. The three of them walked to the center of the forest. Just as they came out of an open grassland, the surrounding trees suddenly moved without any wind. Then, dozens of figures jumped out and surrounded Yin Nuashing and the others. A ferocious aura spread out in this area, causing the air to turn cold. More than a dozen big men walked out of the forest. They were all wearing gray robes, and on their chests, there was a lifelike black longsword that pointed diagonally to the sky. This was the symbol of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. In other words, the people following them were from the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Divine Weapon Pavilion. Seeing the lifelike black sword symbol, Yin Nuashing said in surprise, "Could it be that they were here to seek revenge?" Although he had offended them not long ago, it couldn't be so fast, right? "Little bastard, we meet again." Just as Yin Nuashing was thinking, a cold voice suddenly sounded from the flat ground. A young man wearing a wide gray robe walked out of the crowd with a longsword tattoo on his neck. It was the Divine Weapon Pavilion's inner court disciple that Yin Nuashing had let go of in the restaurant that day, Qilian. At this moment, he was walking out with a sinister smile on his face. His pitch-black eyes contained an unconcealable killing intent. He was the one who had spoken. You were that day that what was it again? Yin Nuoxing's expression turned cold, but she pretended to be suddenly enlightened. Then, she tilted her head and revealed a thoughtful expression as she muttered. The veins on Qi Lian's forehead bulged violently, and the fists in his sleeves were tightly clenched together. He stared at Yin Nuoxing and said with a cold smile, "Seeing that you are about to die, I'll make it clear to you so that you won't become a confused ghost after you die. Remember my name, Qi Lian." "Oh." Yin Nuoxing nodded. Her gaze swept across the dozens of people around her, then looked at the people standing in the sky. Finally, she looked at Qi Lian, patted her head, and said with a frown, That's something Lian." "Oh, Qi Lian? Last time, we agreed to write off our grudges. Now that so many people have come, could it be that they want to have tea and chat with me? Ah, that's so embarrassing." A few more veins appeared on Qi Lian's forehead. He stared fiercely at Yin Nuoxing, and the ominous glint in his eyes was about to burst forth. He said fiercely, "Treating you to tea is not a problem. Give me your life. We will drink a few mouthfuls of tea. Sigh, it's so boring to fight and kill in broad daylight. Why don't we go somewhere else to play? Speaking of which, there's nothing between us, right? You punched me, and in the end, you were sent flying by your own strength." Yin Nuoxing shook her head and sighed. "Nothing? You killed a disciple of my divine weapon pavilion, and you still dare to say that it's nothing?" Speaking of that day's incident, Qi Lian's anger flared up. Furthermore, Yin Nuoxing even said that he was sent flying by him. This was simply purposely infuriating. Waving his hand, Qi Lian sneered. "There's nothing else to say. Hand over your life." "Don't. Can't you talk things over nicely? Why do you have to fight? You're too violent." As soon as Qi Lian's voice fell, Yin Nuoxing's face instantly turned pale. She hurriedly took 2 steps back and said, "You're not allowed to bully Big Brother." Ming suddenly jumped down from Yin Nuoxing's arms and stood in front of him. He opened his small arms, and his tender voice made those who heard laugh out loud. The laughter was filled with killing intent. "You can leave if you want." After laughing a few times, he looked at the pale Yin Nuoxing. Then he looked at Ming and Yin behind him and said with a sinister smile, "Leave this girl and the beauty behind. Then cripple your own limbs, and I'll spare your life." "Don't. My sister is so young, and my elder sister is preparing to get married. If I leave her behind, what should I do?" Yin Nuoxing pulled Ming behind her and said in a trembling voice. She looked at Qi Lian with a flicker in her eyes. "Who cares about you? F***CK. Qi Lian went berserk and roared. "Leave the 2 of them behind and then scram, or die." "Don't." Yin Nuoxing pulled the 2 of them together. "Go to hell." With a wave of Qi Lian's hand, the burly men behind him and surrounding the grassland instantly exploded with a murderous aura. They rushed toward Yin Nuoxing and the other 2 like wolves and tigers. They waved the weapons in their hands and slashed at them. "I told you not to." Yin Nuoxing sighed. Her voice was so calm that it didn't have a trace of emotion. She lightly stomped her feet on the ground, and the ground suddenly protruded rapidly. Immediately after, pillars of blazing blue fire suddenly erupted and bombarded the people who were rushing over at lightning speed. Boom! Such a powerful impact, mixed with a blazing destructive power, directly drowned everyone. Blazing pillars of fire, like gorgeous fireworks, repeatedly shot out from the ground, leaving behind a bottomless pit where they had been standing. "Why are you so disobedient? Really, you?" Qi Lian's eyes widened in shock. However, a moment later, a fierce glint appeared in his eyes. The moment he reacted, a black longsword appeared in his hand. However, just as he was about to rush over and kill Yin Nuoxing with one strike, his footsteps suddenly stopped. A somewhat cold hand was strangling his neck. The palm contained a terrifying energy. If it erupted, even if he was an immortal rank expert, he would definitely die. "You, what did you come over?" Qi Lian was so scared that he couldn't move. He didn't even see Yin Nuoxing move before his neck was strangled. This speed filled him with fear. Perhaps, if he wanted to, he wouldn't even know if he died. I actually don't like to kill people. Sighing, Yin Nuoxing looked into Qi Lian's eyes. The delay just now was only to let him guide the flames into the ground. At that time, he was still thinking that if Qi Lian stopped, he might not have done so. Now, it seemed that he was thinking too much. I am from the Divine Weapon Pavilion. If you kill me, you will be hunted down by the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Feeling a trace of faintly discernible killing intent, Qi Lian couldn't stop trembling. However, he still hardened his tone and said, hoping to use the name of the Divine Weapon Pavilion to make Yin Nuoxing fear him. A dignified, immortal ranked expert actually managed to pull out a tiger skin from the hands of a mere mortal ranked expert. Tell me, what should I say about you? Cowardly, mister. Yin Nuoxing grinned and mocked. If they want to kill you, then so be it. If they want to kill you, they will want to chase you. If they don't kill you, you will still want to chase them. Why don't you just kill me and save yourself the trouble of bringing people back? Shaking his head, a bone-chilling coldness lingered in his eyes for the first time. What he hated the most was people finding trouble with him again and again. Little bastard, the Divine Weapon Pavilion won't let you off. Qi Lian shouted venomously. The longsword in his hand fiercely pierced towards Yin Nuoxing. Sigh. Yin Nuoxing sighed. The blue light on his palm shone brightly, and the ice-blue flames instantly enveloped Qi Lian. The scorching temperature burned his skin, revealing large patches of flesh. The longsword in his hand fell unsteadily, and he kept rolling on the ground. He couldn't even cry out in grief. Grabbing the longsword, he waved it twice and pointed the tip of the sword at Qi Lian. Just as he was about to kill him, he was stopped for a moment by a sound that cut through the sky. Junior, stop. Chapter 68. After staring blankly for a moment, Yin Nuoxing looked towards the edge of the forest. An old man in fluttering white clothes was rapidly flying towards them. He raised a huge black sword high up and waved it towards Yin Nuoxing, releasing a huge black radiance that was 100 feet long. The pitch-black sword chi pierced through the air and chopped down towards Yin Nuoxing and the others. The majestic energy destroyed all the trees below, revealing a large expanse of barren land. Another person from the Divine Weapon Pavilion, seeing the bright features on the old man's robe, Yin Nuoxing's pupils shrank slightly. She grabbed Qi Lian and brought Yin along with her to dodge the sword radiance. The sword radiance that was 100 feet long smashed onto the ground, splashing up a lot of dust. The majestic energy destroyed the ground into a complete mess. Second uncle, save me. Hearing the familiar voice, Qi Lian, who was grabbed by Yin Nuoxing, struggled for a moment. Then, he abruptly opened his mouth and let out a miserable shriek. Yin Nuoxing looked at the half-dead Qi Lian in astonishment and said with interest, "You couldn't scream just now. Why are you screaming so loudly? Junior, put him down. Otherwise die." The old man appeared 100 feet in front of Yin Nuoxing and the others. Seeing Qi Lian, who was burned beyond recognition, he frowned and shouted coldly. A majestic aura spread out, causing Yin Nuoxing's expression to change slightly. Demigod rank. Yin furrowed her brows as well. Suddenly, a demigod rank powerhouse was mentioned. However, they didn't expect this to happen. If they continued to pester him, would a god appear? Yin Nuoxing's hand was tightly clutching Qi Lian's neck. She looked at the old man and then looked at Qi Lian, who was constantly struggling. She stretched out her arm and dangled Qi Lian in the air. She grinned and said, "You want him?" The old man narrowed his eyes. The huge black sword in his hand flickered with a black radiance. Faint silvery white energy flowed around his body. The aura that flowed around him became more and more terrifying. He said in a deep voice, "Junior, put it down. I'll let you live. What if I don't?" With a sneer, Yin Nuoxing exerted more force in her palm. Qi Lian's face quickly turned red. He kept kicking his feet in the air and struggled with all his might. However, he could not break free from Yun Nuoxing's palm. Then go to hell. Seeing Qi Lian's appearance, the old man shouted angrily. His figure trembled and disappeared in the air. In the blink of an eye, he appeared 30 meters in front of Yun Nuoxing. His huge black sword, which was ready to strike, emitted a bright silver light and slashed towards Yun Nuoxing's hands. You can have it. Pinching Qi Lian's neck with her thumb, Yun Nuoxing had a faint smile on her face. She quickly withdrew her hand and grabbed Yuan. Light elements surged, and her figure instantly retreated 100 meters. Seeing that his attack had missed, the old man did not pursue. Looking at the dissipating light particles in front of him, his pupils suddenly shrank. Shock quickly washed over his mind. Light element? Looking at Yun Nuoxing viciously, the old man muttered in his heart, "This kid is from the Light Temple." Thinking of this, the old man could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. When he thought of Yun Nuoxing's indifferent expression, this thought became even more true. Only the people of the Light Temple would not be afraid of their threat. His eyes flickered for a while. The old man fiercely gritted his teeth. His withered palm patted Qi Lian's shoulder. Just as he was about to circulate his energy to heal his injury, a crisp snap of fingers suddenly came from afar. Then, he saw that Qi Lian's face had swelled up, turning red and purple. His body had actually swelled up. Blazing blue flames drilled out from every pore of his body. His entire body was inflating like a balloon. The old man was greatly alarmed. His palm continuously patted several places on Qi Lian's body. Boundless energy continuously drilled into those acupuncture points, suppressing the rampaging energy in his body. The latter's body also gradually calmed down. The old man breathed a sigh of relief. His aged eyes were blooming with an ominous glint. He fiercely looked at Yun Nuoxing in the distance. Just as he was about to angrily shout, he saw the latter looking at him with a mocking expression. She put her left thumb and middle finger together and gently rubbed them together. Ta! Following a crisp sound, Qi Lian's body, which had just calmed down, suddenly blossomed with countless blue rays of light. Boundless energy flew chaotically in his meridians. In just an instant, his entire body had swelled to the limit. Then, boom, blue flames exploded in the sky, as if a blue star had exploded in the sky. A sea of fire extended several hundred meters. Blazing energy carried strong winds as it spread out in an instant, burning the forest below to ashes. The temperature of the world rapidly rose. The scorching air evaporated the thin water element in the air. This area instantly became dry. An energy that was dozens of times more majestic suddenly erupted from the sea of fire, instantly dispersing the blue sea of fire. A gloomy old man with disheveled hair and disheveled clothes suddenly appeared. His aged eyes contained a glint that could devour people. "Very good, kid. You dared to kill a member of my chief family. Very good." The old man stared at Yun Nuoxing and said calmly. However, under that calmness, there was a volcano about to erupt. He said word by word, "Even if you are a member of the Radiant Shrine, you have to pay the price for killing a member of my chief family." A member of the Radiant Shrine? Yun Nuoxing stared blankly. A moment later, he realized that this guy must have seen his light element and made the connection. "You old fart. You're really long-winded. If you're tired of living, just say it. We'll send you on your way." Yuan pursed her lips. On her jade hand behind her back, a complex array the size of a palm was emitting a resplendent light. As energy surged, the air became extremely hot. It was already accumulating power, ready to be unleashed. The wrinkled old face trembled. His gloomy eyes stared unwaveringly at the two of them. He seemed to have felt a trace of danger. Although he found it unbelievable, he did not act blindly without thinking. He held his huge sword horizontally in front of him and did not say anything. "Fisk, old man, do you only know how to talk? Didn't you want us to pay the price? Why aren't you coming? Are you scared? Old vile spawn, you do have some nice words to say." Seeing that the white-clothed old man did not rush over, Yuan blinked her eyes and teased. His eyebrows twitched. Although he really wanted to rush over and kill Yuin, his cautious nature made him feel a dangerous aura. Therefore, other than the ominous glint in his eyes, the old man did not move. He held his huge sword and took 2 steps back. He said in a cold voice, "The divine weapon pavilion and the chief family will remember this debt." After he finished speaking, he glared fiercely at the 2 of them. He turned around and was about to leave. The sound of flesh being pierced resounded clearly in the silent sky. Brilliant blood suddenly blossomed in front of the old man's chest. The sudden pain made the old man's mind blur for a moment. His life force was rapidly draining away. He trembled as he lowered his head to look at his chest. There, a shining silver halberd dyed red had pierced through his chest. Fresh blood dripped down the long handle. "You!" The old man spat out a large mouthful of blood. His face was aghast. He had not sensed any energy fluctuations at all. His chest had been pierced through by the halberd. At this moment, he finally regretted it. Why did he provoke someone who possessed the light element? He wanted to say something, but his throat was blocked by the boiling blood. He could not say anything. His aged eyes flashed with a ruthless glint. He struggled to stab the huge sword in his hand behind him. As expected of uncle and nephew. Even before death, your actions are the same. The halberd in his hand stirred fiercely, completely destroying the old man's heart. A trace of blue flame flowed from his hand to the halberd, instantly enveloping him. Yin Nuashing glanced at him and said indifferently, "Didn't anyone teach you not to expose your back to the enemy? Idiotic old man. You already recognized that I possess the light element. Yet you still underestimated me. Divine weapon pavilion. Chief family will not let you off." The old man's body was trembling rapidly. He spat out these words with hatred. The smell of death spread throughout his body. The intense pain wanted to cover his mind. Knowing that he would not be able to survive this time, the old man's eyes instantly turned red. The energy in his body instantly went berserk. His body rapidly expanded. It seemed that he still wanted to self-detonate and drag others down with him. Hey, as expected of uncle and nephew. Seeing the old man's actions, without waiting for Yin Nuashing to make a move, Yuin rushed over. The fiery red array in her hand fiercely slapped towards the old man's head. Traces of flames seeped out from the array. Before the array could touch his head, the flames that seeped out refined him completely. Not even a trace of him was left. Seeing the old man disappear in an instant, Yuin dispersed the fiery red array in her hand and muttered softly, "Sigh, it's so troublesome to deal with a demigod-rank person. Next time, I might as well just use a sealing array." Yin Nuashing spread out his hands. Who asked her to have such a high cultivation? If it wasn't for the divine artifact on him, he really would have had to run away today. The demigod rank was still a very distant rank to them. It wasn't that easy to cross ranks. At the very least, they couldn't cross so many ranks with their own strength. It's quiet now, right? Clapping his hands, Yin Nuashing looked at the surrounding small forest. He then emitted a soul wave and carefully observed for a while. After waiting for 2 minutes and not finding any movement, he nodded and said to Ming with a smile, "Let's go and buy clothes." "Brother, you're so naughty when you fight." Ming stuck out her tongue. Her eyes and ears were covered the whole time, just now. Although she didn't see or hear anything, she could guess some of it. She immediately rushed into Yin Nuashing's arms and scratched him. The latter was very embarrassed, while Yuin held her stomach and laughed. "Brother doesn't want to fight either. But if we don't fight this time, there will be more fights in the future." Yin Nuashing rubbed Ming's head and smiled helplessly. "Ming knows. I'm just saying, it's fine as long as brother doesn't get hurt." She nodded her little head and bounced twice in Yin Nuashing's chest before muttering softly. Yin Nuashing smiled softly and led the 2 of them towards the divine weapon city. In the black hall, a faint silver light lingered on the huge pillars. The seats below were filled with people. A majestic aura spread out, causing the guards at the entrance of the hall to tremble in fear. From time to time, they would look at a man sitting in the middle of the hall. their eyes filled with fear and respect. The silver-white throne in the middle of the hall had faint silver lines spreading down. Around the throne, some strange phenomena would appear from time to time and then disappear. The man on the throne had long, silver-white hair. His hemp clothes made him look more ordinary. His silver-white eyes looked at the crowd below. His fingers gently tapped on the throne, and a gentle voice quietly echoed in the place. Elder Ying's soul stone tablet has been shattered. His voice wasn't loud, but it had a heavy, oppressive feeling that made people not dare to ignore it. His voice had just fallen when a commotion broke out below. The soul tablet was something they knew very well. It contained a sliver of their power of the spirit, and if something were to happen to it, the soul tablet would shatter as well. If that was the case, something must have happened to Elder Ying. There is actually someone who dares to attack the people of the Divine Weapon Pavilion in the Divine Weapon City. If an ordinary elder died, then so be it. Although it was a little disappointing, there was nothing they could do in this chaotic place. They couldn't even hope to govern this place. It was already a great fortune for them to be able to sit here and not be torn down. Moreover, even if they were killed one day, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, this place was so chaotic that it made one's hair stand on end. However, Qi Ying was different. She was from the Qi clan of the 8 great ancient clans. If they knew that one of their own had died here, they would definitely come and denounce them. In a fit of anger, this city might even be removed. The Qi clan had such power. For the time being, I don't know. This time, Elder Ying accompanied Qi Lian to the south of the Divine Weapon City. What were they doing? Go find this person or this group of people. No matter who they are, capture them first and bring them to me. The people of the Divine Weapon Pavilion can't be killed so easily. On the throne, the hemp-clothed man said slowly, "Yes." The crowd below stood up and responded respectfully. Then, their figures flashed, and they all disappeared from the main hall. The space also quieted down. With the departure of the crowd, the main hall instantly became empty. After a long while, the hemp-clothed man slowly stood up. His silvery white eyes looked up at the ceiling. With a light wave of his hand, the strange phenomenon surrounding him suddenly solidified, forming weapons of different shapes. Silver light flashed, revealing their sharpness. How dare you touch the people of the Qi clan? Chapter 69. Two people were walking slowly on a small path in the forest. A little girl was being held in someone's arms, and her laughter made this quiet forest more lively. The three of them were naturally Yin Nuoxing and the others. After walking around Divine Weapon City for half a day, they couldn't find any shops related to ordinary life. After asking around, they walked out through the east gate of Divine Weapon City. 10 miles away, there was a small town that was specially provided for passers-by to rest. After hearing this news, they didn't delay and directly walked out. 10 miles was nothing, and it was just enough for them to relax and walk around leisurely. Therefore, they didn't choose to fly over in a spurt of energy and stay in nature for a while to cultivate their sentiments. They chatted and laughed along the way, and it didn't seem boring. As they chatted and laughed, 10 miles was just a matter of a few jokes. Yin Nuoxing suddenly felt relaxed as he stood on a hillside and looked down at the small town with a tranquil atmosphere. He had only stayed in the Divine Weapon City for a few days, and his mind was tense every day. He was constantly vigilant of the surrounding situation, so as to prevent himself from falling to the ground in the next second while talking and laughing. Over time, even his nerves were a little sensitive. If he stayed for too long, he would probably be like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. He would immediately draw his saber when he saw something amiss. Therefore, she suddenly felt that the atmosphere had relaxed, and even her mind was relaxed. Turning her head, Yin Nuoxing saw that Yin also had a big sigh of relief. She was much more relaxed now that she wasn't in that oppressive atmosphere. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then, they brought Ming to the small town at the bottom of the hillside. Although it was called a small town, it was still about 10,000 feet in length and width. It was comparable to a small city. The houses inside were all built with wood and surrounded by lush trees. There was a natural smell, and the faint fragrance of the leaves and the smell of the earth filled the small town. All travelers are welcome to stop here. The two of them stood at the entrance of the small town, looked up at the wooden plaque hanging above, and read softly. There were quite a lot of people coming and going around, but compared to the flow of people in Divine Weapon City, it couldn't be compared. The people entering and leaving the small town would all look at Yuen and little Ming in Yun Nuoshing's arms with a hint of surprise and a smile. The admiration in their voices didn't have a trace of concealment. Although Yun Nuoshing had once mentioned that she could let Ming walk on her own, the little girl pouted and shook her little head unwillingly, saying that she had to be carried by her brother. This made Yun Nuoshing feel a little helpless, but she didn't complain. The little girl's body was soft, like an exquisite doll. Her fair little face had a hint of childlike innocence, and her sparkling and translucent appearance made people unable to part with her. From the way Yun's eyes lit up and how she wanted to take over, it was obvious that little Ming was simply attracted to both men and women, old and young. However, under Yun's stunned gaze, she plunged into the arms of the helpless Yun Nuoshing. She clung onto him like a sloth and refused to let go. Therefore, now that she was being watched like a monkey and seeing Yuen happily pouting her little mouth, Yun Nuoshing could only helplessly walk into the small town, leaving behind a group of eager gazes. There was an endless stream of people and carriages in the small town. Both sides of the streets were paved with green tiles, and there were a great number of shops. All in all, it could be said to be a unique kind of prosperity. Yun Nuoshing carried Ming in her right hand and habitually held onto Yuen with her left hand. They weaved through the crowd and soon found a tailor shop. Compared to the shops next to them, it could be considered a larger one. The three of them walked into the tailor shop. There were all kinds of clothes hanging on the crisscrossing clothes racks, and none of them were duplicates. The three of them were dizzy looking at them. At this time, there were many people in the shop choosing clothes either seriously or casually. When the shop door opened and bright sunlight shone in, everyone looked over. When they saw little Ming, who was like a little bird, they could not help but click their tongues in praise. Then, their eyes lit up, and they looked at Ming, who was a little scared. His little head was buried in Yun Nuoshing's chest, and his little hands were tightly clutching his lapel. When the surrounding people saw this, they all laughed in their hearts and then turned their gazes away. The tailor's eyes were shining brightly, but he still calmly measured Ming's size and told Yun Nuoshing that they could come and get it in 2 hours. Then, he sent them out of the tailor's shop with a covetous gaze. 2 hours? How do you plan to spend this time? After leaving the tailor's shop, Yun Nuoshing looked at Yuen, then lowered her head and asked Ming, "Let's have a meal." Yuen waved her little fist and smiled. When there was nothing to do, eating was the best way to pass the time. Okay. Ming also waved his little fist happily. His soft purplish-black hair swayed continuously, and his 2 little canine teeth were exposed as he smiled. Yun Nuoshing, these 2 gluttons. She helplessly held her forehead. There was a restaurant that looked very good at the side. Yun Nuoshing also brought the 2 of them in. After throwing down a bag of gold coins, the restaurant staff politely brought them into a small private room. After that, a table of banquet was served. A pair of silver forks were swung like the wind. Yun Nuoshing and Ming stared in astonishment at Yuen, who was wolfing down her food like a ferocious tiger descending a mountain. They couldn't help but swallow their saliva and put down their knives and forks. They watched her eating with interest. A certain someone, who felt that something was wrong, was startled. She raised her head and saw 2 pairs of interested eyes. She was very embarrassed and immediately slowed down, her movements very elegant. "Eat slowly, no one is stealing your food." Yun Nuoshing sighed and took out a handkerchief to wipe her mouth as she said helplessly. They ate and stopped, chatted and laughed, and just like this, they leisurely walked out of the restaurant and into the tailor's shop, leaving behind a mess. The waiter's jaw hit the floor as he slowly walked out of the restaurant and into the tailor's shop. The tailor was still looking at Ming with sparkling eyes. After a while, he calmly took out a few children's clothes and handed them to Yun Nuoshing. According to the request, They were all purplish-black. Although a little of it was mixed in with his own preferences, Ming liked it very much and immediately changed into it. His originally small and delicate body, after some decorations, matched with Yu Yin's unique outfit, he became even more lovable. He bounced around the shop, and his crystal-clear little face made people want to go up and pinch him. Suddenly, the door of the shop silently opened, and a burly man walked in. Ming didn't see him and accidentally bumped into him. He sat down on the ground, giving Yin Nuoxing a fright. However, when she was about to stand up and apologize, she saw an extremely ferocious face. She was so frightened that she immediately burst into tears. She charged into Yin Nuoxing's embrace at almost godly speed and buried her head in his chest. Her small hands tightly wrapped around his neck as she sobbed softly, causing the hearts of those who heard her to tighten and even find it difficult to breathe. Yin Nuoxing gently stroked her head and comforted her softly. He had seen the truth very clearly. It could only be said that Ming Ming was careless, but as for the burly man, when he came back to his senses, he saw a little girl bawling loudly. Then, everyone glared at him angrily. Their faces were filled with grief and anger, and they looked murderous. Those who didn't know what was going on would think that there was a huge grudge between them. This made the burly man feel very embarrassed and sad. He thought that he had really hurt little Ming, so he hurriedly trotted over to little Ming and bowed to apologize. When they saw the burly man's appearance, it was everyone's turn to be stunned. This scene was not right. A burly man who was 10 feet tall bowed to a relatively small child. This scene was comical no matter how they looked at it. It should be a burly man who patted his chest with a hand the size of a praying mat and shouted, "I am the king. That kid has to pay for my medical expenses." That fierce face must have grown in the wrong place. No matter how they looked at it, it was simply a King Kong Barbie doll. Reality proved that when Ming saw the burly man, she cried even harder. Her sparkling tears soaked Yin Nuoxing's clothes. The burly man's face was covered in cold sweat. He didn't know whether to comfort or laugh. He stood there like a fool and felt so wrong that he almost cried with Ming. "I'm innocent." Yin Nuoxing patted the King Kong Barbie doll's shoulder and hurriedly ran out of the tailor shop with Ming. They jumped into a small forest at the side and coaxed and teased Ming for a long time. Only then did Yin Nuoxing recover her smile. This made Yin Nuoxing and Ming Yu sweat profusely. Was it really so difficult to take care of a child? They strolled to the small town and then wandered back to Divine Weapon City. It was noon, and there were more people on the streets. They surged out from all directions and gathered on one street. An inexplicable, tense atmosphere instantly enveloped Yin Nuoxing and the others. However, they weren't like birds who were startled by the twang of a bow. They constantly spread out their soul force and were vigilant of their surroundings. When the soul force spread out to a certain distance, Yin Nuoxing suddenly exclaimed in surprise. He sensed that everyone seemed to be surging towards the same place with a purpose. "What's wrong?" Hearing his voice, Yuyin turned her head. Mei Mao scanned the surroundings vigilantly. A faint fiery red glow appeared on her jade-like hand. She thought that something had happened. He waved his hand and told her not to be so vigilant. His soul force surged towards the place where he sensed that something was wrong. Finally, it spread to a palace. There were 2 bold and powerful words written on the signboard of the palace. "Stone Workshop." "Stone Workshop?" Yuyin listened to his explanation and then shook her head. They hadn't been in Divine Weapon City for long and hadn't explored all the shops. It was normal that they didn't recognize it. However, seeing so many people rushing over, something must have happened. "Let's go take a look." Due to the human nature of wanting to join in the fun, Yuyin smiled and pulled Yin Nuoxing, who was feeling helpless, and ran towards that place. The stone workshop was called a workshop, but it wasn't the same as the Myriad Stone shop. It was a huge palace that was dazzling and resplendent. It was as if it was made of glass, sparkling and translucent. Under the sunlight, it reflected a dazzling light. No matter where it was, it would be an eye-catching existence. When they arrived at the stone workshop, Yin Nuoxing and Mei Mao first took a look at the palace. then looked at the crowd that could squeeze a person to death. Immediately, they felt unwell. In the end, Yuen went to scout for information alone. After half an hour, she came back. Wiping the sweat on her forehead with her jade-like hand, she slowly explained the situation. Stone Appreciation Conference? Hearing this name, Yuen Nuoxing was stunned. What was there to reward for stones? Yuen nodded. The Stone Appreciation Conference was actually a conference where the people of the stone workshop would display raw stones that seemed to contain rare and precious stones to the public. At the same time, interested people could take a look and buy 1 or 2 pieces. However, since they could be displayed, which one of them hadn't gone through a strict inspection? In this chaotic place, not everything was as open and aboveboard as it seemed on the surface. If one foolishly went to buy it, they might be cheated until not even their bones were left. However, there were also people who hoped that the people of the stone workshop would make a mistake. Other than some ordinary materials contained in the raw materials, there were also people who hoped to obtain a rare and precious stone and make a fortune. So that's how it is. Yuen Nuoxing nodded in realization, then smiled and said, "Then let's go take a look." Chapter 70. In a huge hall, rows of exhibition stands were arranged in an orderly manner. Above each stand were pieces of strangely shaped rocks. Some were big, some were small, and some were heavy. The faint smell of soil permeated the hall. The palace was divided into 3 levels. According to the quality of the items placed on display, they were divided into 3 levels: high grade, middle grade, and low grade. Of course, it was also used to divide the amount of money spent. It's almost like an exhibition. Facing the fragrance of soil, Yuen Nuoxing and the other 2 stepped into the hall of the stone workshop. They couldn't help but mutter when they saw the beautiful arrangement of huge rocks. In front of each huge rock, there was someone seriously admiring it. They were constantly knocking on it. Their frown was so focused that it seemed as if they couldn't wait to directly cut the rock open and explore it. "Little star, I'll leave this kind of thing to you. Big sister can't help much." Yuen poked the corner of Yuen Nuoxing's eyes and said softly with a smile, "The evil spirit eye could be said to be able to break through all methods. It had the ability to see through things. Some rare treasures would release some aura and use stones to hide their figures. However, it was still more or less possible to see through them. Spreading out her hands, the evil spirit, I was indeed the best for this kind of thing." Yuen Nuoxing simply opened her pair of eyes that were emitting a bright light. Her pupils turned into 2 tiny diamond-shaped and constantly swept across the rows of huge rocks in the hall. However, what made her a little disappointed was that there really wasn't anything good on the first level. It was basically all useless rocks. Among them, there were only a pitifully small number of low-grade Xian crystals. It seemed that they were really strictly divided according to the grades. "There's nothing on the first level. Let's go up directly." Yuen Nuoxing tugged at the corner of Yuyen's clothes and transmitted her voice. Yuen nodded and randomly asked someone about the passageway to the 2nd level. She looked here for a very long time, but didn't see any stairs or anything else that could lead to the 2nd level. The decorations on the 2nd level were much more unique. Even a number of huge rocks placed on display was reduced. However, there were still several rows of them. At this time, some people who had taken a fancy to the huge rocks quietly called for the people in the stone workshop. They quietly traded and then sneaked away with the huge rocks. Slowly walking past the rows of huge rocks, her already small eyes narrowed into a slit. She carefully observed the interior of the huge rocks so that others wouldn't notice anything wrong. However, it had to be said that the quality of the huge rocks placed on the 2nd level was much higher than the ones on the 1st level. Among the raw rocks, other than some Xian crystals, there were also 4th and 5th level forging materials. There were also some other strange things that Yuen Nuoxing didn't recognize all of them. She had to take the book out to read. After casually looking around, there were some things that tempted him. However, it wasn't to the point where he would miss out on this opportunity. Moreover, they weren't things that he really needed. Therefore, He was only a little tempted and didn't intend to buy them. He was looking for some 8th level forging materials for the Netherworld Ruin Sword to upgrade in the future. Although he didn't need them now, these materials were very precious. Even if he had money, he might not necessarily be able to buy them. If he started looking for them earlier, he might just be able to find them when he arrived. After making 2 rounds, other than buying a huge rock that weighed 1,000 kilograms, he didn't buy anything else. Under the gaze of the salesperson, who was looking at him as if he was looking at a fat sheep, he slowly walked towards the 3rd level. That rock contained a 6th level fiery sun rock, which was a rarer type of fire elemental rock. Its value was definitely higher than the price of the raw rock he bought. Therefore, one side was laughing as they slaughtered another person, while the other side was laughing as they made a profit. Before stepping onto the 3rd level, Yin Nuoxing first rested for a while on the platform. He rubbed his eyes. Using the evil spirit eye continuously like this made him a little tired and his vision a little blurry. After resting for a while, Yin Nuoxing stood up unsteadily and led the 2 to the 3rd level, the upper level. That was where the most precious stones were stored. Furthermore, when one bought a stone, they had to be cut open in front of everyone under the pretext of studying and studying. However, everyone knew the principle of not showing off one's wealth. If there really were some rare treasures, if they were to be cut open like this, there would definitely be people who would covet it. In Divine Weapon City, robbing people halfway through, killing people for their goods, nothing unexpected would happen. After standing in front of the entrance of the 3rd level for a while, the 2 black-clothed guards at the entrance also raised their eyes and looked at Yin Nuoxing and the other 2 as if they were examining them. After a long time, they finally put down their intimidating gazes and moved aside to open the door, stiffly gesturing for them to enter. Scratching his head, Yin Nuoxing and Yuan looked at each other and squeezed through the door side by side. In the pitch-black passageway, it was so dark that one couldn't even see one's own fingers. There was only a tiny bit of light at the entrance that couldn't shine into the passageway. In the passageway, there were constantly probing fluctuations coming from both sides, constantly scanning Yin Nuoxing and the other 2. Sensing that these probing didn't have any malicious intent, he ignored them. When they came out of the pitch-black passageway, they saw a large hall wrapped in curtains. The surrounding sunlight couldn't penetrate those thick curtains, and the only source of light was the gentle light emitted by the crystals embedded in the ceiling. When it shone into the large hall, it wasn't very bright, but it also didn't seem dark. The large hall was extremely spacious, but the number of huge stones placed here was far less than the lower levels. There were only 2 rows that stretched as far as the eye could see, but there were still close to 50 huge stones. There was a faint fluorescent light flowing on the surface of the raw stones, and some of them were emitting astonishing energy fluctuations. With one look, one could tell that they weren't ordinary objects, but they didn't know how precious they were. Moreover, when Yin Nuoxing came out of the passageway and saw a signboard hanging at the side, her face twitched uncontrollably. Damn it, 10,000 gold coins per kilogram. It was really hard to buy them, even with 1,000 gold coins. It was almost 10,000 gold coins. Each of those huge stones on display basically weighed over 100 kilograms. Although they were much smaller than the huge stones on the lower levels, the price was more than twice as expensive. Buying stones here was simply a demonstration of what it meant to throw away 10,000 gold coins. If the stones they bought were actually worthless, then they would suffer a huge loss. Although those stones looked quite good, they might actually be a trick of the stone workshop. Little star, how much money do you have left? Yuan also saw the signboard hanging at the side, and her pretty face trembled a little before she asked. I've almost used it up. I have less than 60 million left. He silently calculated in his heart. The gold coins he obtained from Mu Ingzi had been squandered to the point that he was about to die. Although it was still a huge sum of money, it was actually very easy to use up. For a cultivator, from full body equipment to spare items to life-saving pills, all kinds of equipment, 60 million would quickly shrink to nothing. You could buy about 6 stones. You have to find the most valuable one. Yuan calculated, looked at the stones on display, and muttered, "It's not that simple." Yin Nuashing helplessly sighed and shook his head. He wanted to spend the most money, but in this place, the evil spirit I did not seem to be of much use. Looking at the stone materials, they were all blurry, as if there was something covering the stone materials, preventing him from peeking. He did not know if it was the chi released by the divine items in the stone materials, or if it was done by the people in the stone workshop. "It's been blocked." Hearing her words, Yuan also guessed a little. When she saw Yun Nuashing nod, she couldn't help but sigh. The things on the third floor were really cautious. "Big brother, let's go take a look at the last one." When the two of them were sighing, Ming suddenly tugged on Yin Nuashing's lapel, bit his ear, and whispered softly. Yin Nuashing and the other two looked at Ming in surprise. Although they were a little confused, they still nodded. However, they didn't rush over at once. Instead, they slowly walked down the stairs. They looked at the pile of huge rocks in front of them for a while. They swayed back and forth. Finally, they walked to the stone at the end and carefully looked at it. This stone was very strange. It was 5 meters long horizontally, and its surface was uneven. There were many holes and marks that seemed to be left behind by wind erosion and water erosion. It could be said to be full of holes. However, at the top of the stone, there was a 3-meter-wide, protruding thing that looked like a sword hilt. No matter how one looked at it, it looked like a sword was inserted diagonally into the stone. The sword in the stone was unearthed in the Tianyuan ancient mine. Until now, countless stone masters have come to see it, but because they couldn't see it clearly, no one dared to touch it. "Why, young man, do you want to see it too?" While the two of them were looking at the sword hilt, an old man in white clothes slowly walked over from the side. His hands were behind his back, and he had white hair and a youthful face. His hair and beard were all white, and his eyes were so deep that it was like an invisible world, making it impossible to see through him. When the old man said this, he sounded quite hopeful, as if he wanted Yin Nuashing to cut the sword in the stone. Sword in the stone? Hearing the trace of hope in the old man's voice, Yin Nuashing was stunned for a moment. Then, he carefully looked at it. However, the stone's name was very appropriate. After all, it really looked like a sword that was inserted into the stone. The old man stroked his beard and looked at the sword in the stone with deep eyes. He said softly, "This stone was unearthed for tens of millions of years, or even hundreds of millions of years. The energy it released completely blocked all detection methods. Many people couldn't do anything to it. It has been placed here for a long time, and gradually it became a sore point for everyone in the stone workshop." "Then why don't you just cut it open?" Yuan pouted and muttered. The old man smiled and shook his head. He didn't say anything. At this time, Ming tugged at Yin Nuashing's clothes again. Her small mouth was close to his ear, and she whispered, "Brother, buy it." Nodding his head in an almost undetectable manner, Yin Nuashing slowly rotated around this 5-meter-long, huge rock. The huge rock was a mixture of black and gray. His finger gently rubbed the surface of the rock. From time to time, he would bend his finger and knock it twice. Although he did not know how to look at the rock, he could still pay attention to the strange places. However, what he could not understand was just what was so strange about this seemingly ordinary and even somewhat broken rock. He couldn't see anything strange about it at all. However, Yin Nuashing knew that Ming's physique was a little special. She was very sensitive to energy. Perhaps she saw something different about it? The commotion here attracted the attention of everyone in the hall. Immediately, shocked gazes turned over. Some old men who were so old that they didn't even have eyebrows left the guests they were receiving and hurried over. There was only one person who didn't move. It was the young man sitting at the bottom of the stairs. However, at this time, he opened his black eyes. There was a trace of vicissitudes in his expression. "Young man, are you really going to touch this stone?" Many masters who are highly skilled in the field of stone analysis have come to take a look at it, but they all gave up in the end. "Young man, please think twice." A group of old men who were so old that their teeth were falling out walked over. When they saw Yin Nuashing's actions, they couldn't help but be stunned. They also wanted to cut open the sword in the stone, but in the end, they put it down after looking at it for a while. Yin Nuashing sighed. To be honest, he really didn't know how to look at stones. The only method he could use was the evil spirit eye to see through it. If it wasn't for little Ming saying that he wanted to buy it, he wouldn't have come to take a look. After another sigh, Yin Nuashing looked at the surrounding people and then looked at the sword in the stone. His eyes narrowed slightly. Chapter 71. Big Brother. Seeing that Yun Nuashing was unmoved, Ming thought that he did not believe her. She tugged on Yun Nuashing's long hair and stuck her little mouth directly to his ear. She murmured in a low voice, as if she had been wronged. Yun Nuashing nodded slightly and closed his eyes for a while. Then he suddenly opened them. A bright golden light filled his entire eyes, while the other colors all gathered in his two diamond-shaped pupils. Several small arrays floated out from his eyes and moved with the movement of his pupils. Threads extended out and adhered to the sword in the stone, causing it to instantly become crystal clear. It was as if colors were flowing, dazzling, and eye-catching. This is Heaven's Eye? No, it doesn't seem like it. Could it be a new secret technique? The eye contains an extremely powerful penetrative power. It can analyze arrays and see through the origin of all things. However, I have never heard of such a strange technique in the Sourcepeak region. Could it be from another region? Could it be that this young man is also a divination master? He can see through all the topography of the universe? The surrounding people could not help but cry out in surprise when they saw the pair of eyes. However, they did not know the name of this secret technique and were momentarily stunned. They looked at each other, and in the end, they all looked at Yin Nuashing and waited patiently. Ignoring the cries of surprise, his eyes looked through the array and saw through almost every inch of the sword in the stone. However, a large area in the center was still covered by a layer of white film. No matter how much Yin Nuashing increased the power of his evil spirit eye, he could not pierce through that layer of film. Towards the end, his eyes even seeped out traces of bright red blood, continuously flowing out and sliding down his handsome face. This was a sign that the evil spirit eye was overloaded. The eye itself could no longer withstand a sharp increase in power. Big Brother. Ming was startled by the bright red blood dripping onto her purple clothes. Mist quietly condensed in her lively eyes. Her small hands frantically stroked Yin Nuashing's face, carelessly wiping away the two bright red marks. However, her face was smeared with blood, making her look extremely ferocious. Little Star. Yuan also cried out in alarm, but she did not know what to do. Right now, Yin Nuashing was using the evil spirit essences beyond her limits. If she were to carelessly interrupt, there might be a serious backlash. Therefore, Yuan could only watch in a daze, as if she was extremely anxious. The onlookers, including the white-robed old man, were all stunned. This was the rhythm of playing with one's life. This young man was too ruthless. He didn't hesitate to harm himself, although he could push his power to an unprecedented peak in a short period of time. If he didn't control it well, his eyes would be ruined. For an unknown stone, was it worth it? Child, stop. Your eye has reached its limit. You can't use it anymore. Young man, quickly close your eyes, otherwise your eyes will be useless. Young man, give up. It's fine if you don't want this strange stone. Don't waste your future. The surrounding elders were constantly persuading him. They were afraid that Yin Nuashing's eyes would be ruined. If that happened, it would be a huge loss to the entire heavenly mystery realm. Ignoring everyone else, he only used his hand to pat Ming Ming's head to reassure her. Then, with a thought, the power of the evil spirit eye increased a step further. Many talismans appeared from the void, densely adhering to the sword in the stone. Small-scale arrays were drawn in front of him, floating in front of Yin Nua's star. They drew in the energy of this world, drilling into the stone together. Then, they reflected the light, illuminating the stone. However, they still could not see the central region. A green array appeared on his right hand. He slapped the sword in the stone. His eyes looked through this small array, directly seeing through the inside, While everyone was trying to persuade him, they couldn't help but sigh. With this kind of method, only a special stone could block his observation. It was estimated that even some immortal-level arrays would be seen through in an instant and then destroyed, until the last rune appeared from the void and adhered to the sword in the stone. Yin Nuoxing still couldn't see through it. At this time, his eyes were already soaked in blood. His face was stained with blood, and even the corners of his mouth were bleeding. At this time, he was at his wit's end. Thus, with a light sigh, the surrounding runes quickly dissipated under the control of his mind. Those arrays of various sizes also gradually disappeared. Okay, I won't. Shaking his head and sighing, Yin Nuoxing was about to close the evil spirit essences. However, Yuan was the first to cover it with her jade palm. Traces of energy continuously flowed from her ice-cold palm into Yin Nuoxing's eyes. I'm fine. You don't have to do this. Wiping away the blood on his face, Yin Nuoxing bitterly smiled. Yuan was using her own life force to heal him. Although the effect was good, this way, the one who was injured would be her. He knew the limits of the evil spirit essences, so he wasn't worried about anything. Gently moving the jade hand away, Yin Nuoxing stuck out his tongue and smiled at Yin's sullen face. He opened his bloodshot eyes and blinked at her, indicating that he was fine. Then, he lowered his head to look at Ming, whose small eyes were tightly shut and long eyelashes were constantly trembling. He took out a handkerchief and wiped away the blood dripping from Ming's small face. Then, he rubbed her head and looked at the sword in the stone again. How is it? When the elders saw that Yin Nuoxing was fine, they secretly breathed a sigh of relief. They hurriedly came over and asked anxiously. This stone that had become their sore point made them want to immediately cut it open. However, they were also afraid that their hopes would be dashed. This was a tangled feeling. Therefore, they could only borrow the hands of an outsider to cut it open. At that time, even if nothing happened, it would only be a sigh. Tilting his head, Yin Nuoxing looked at the sword in the stone. This stone was worth 40 million, which was almost all of his assets. Although he could casually take anything from his body, the value would not be less than this amount. However, in the area that Yin Nuoxing had categorized as untouchable assets, it would be best if he could not touch it. Money was nothing. It was only 40 million. Even if it was for little Ming, losing 400 million was nothing. Moreover, Yin Nuoxing also believed that this little girl would not ask him to buy anything for no reason. Little star, have you seen through it? Yuan asked telepathically as she stroked Yin Nuoxing's head. No. However, let's still buy it. I think there will be something special. Yin Nuoxing sighed and replied telepathically. Nodding his head, he looked at the crowd and took a deep breath. His deep voice echoed in the hall. The determination in his voice made everyone suck in a breath of cold air, and their hearts clenched tightly. Buy it. As his voice fell, even a young man who was sitting cross-legged on the stone platform at the bottom of the stairs stood up abruptly. He walked quickly toward Yin Nuoxing and the others. When those old people who had white hair saw him, they hurriedly bowed and saluted. The sword in the stone was a rare stone with a sky-high price. It had been displayed here for many years and was like a treasure. It had long become a sore point for everyone. It was also a kind of belief. Now that someone was really going to cut it open, they were so excited that it was as if they had been injected with dragon's blood. This old man has been waiting here for so many years. Finally, someone is going to cut open this sword in the stone. The young man stood in front of the sword in the stone. He looked a little excited and emotional as he patted the stone. Then, he looked at Yin Nuoxing and said in a deep voice, "Young man, have you made your decision?" When they heard his question, everyone's hearts were in their mouths again. They looked nervously at Yin Nuoxing. They looked as if they couldn't wait to answer for him. I've made my decision. Yin Nuoxing nodded and took out a purple gold card. She randomly threw it into the hands of the old man in white. Then, she nodded at the young man and said with a smile, "Master, please do it." Me? The young man was stunned for a moment. He thought that Yin Nuoxing would cut open the stone herself. He didn't expect such an honorable task to be casually thrown to him. Well, I'm still carrying the child. I can't do it. Yin Nuashing nodded and raised Ming, who was in her arms. She said casually, but in her heart, she muttered, I don't understand this line of work. At this time, the little girl was also looking at the sword and the stone with anticipation. Her big eyes were shining with a purple light. It was very strange. It seems that today's trip was not in vain. Yes, Master Shao. Since this little brother has made such a request, you should do it once in a long time. This will definitely be the most thrilling event in the stone workshop in all these years. The people who came to watch were not only people from the stone workshop. There were also many people from Divine Weapon City. Among them, there were a few people who had the symbol of a long sword on them, which directly revealed their identity. Okay, this old man will do it once. The young man who was called Master Shao nodded. He didn't pretend to be pretentious. He took out a silver knife from his arms and rubbed it in his hand for a while. When Master Shao held the silver knife in his hand, the huge hall instantly quieted down. It was so quiet that only the rhythmic sound of heartbeats could be heard. Everyone stared at the silver knife with eager eyes. Master Shao held the knife and made a few strokes on the outside of the sword and the stone. He was very careful and cautious. The curve of the knife was very small, almost touching the stone gently. Ka! When the first sound came, everyone held their breath. It was as if a sword was placed across their hearts in an instant. The sword in the stone was about to be unlocked. Master Shao moved the knife like the wind, scattering the stone fragments. He didn't show any mercy. He waved the silver knife left and right, and soon, the end of the stone was cut open. What fell were only black and silver stone powder. The slightly bigger stones would also shatter into stone powder when they touched the ground. This made everyone stunned for a while. The section of the sword and the stone that was cut open was completely black. There were no rare treasures, not even Xian crystals. No one was nervous. The sword and the stone was 5 meters long. This small piece was only a small part of the entire size. Moreover, they had never seen a stone that was alternating between black and gray. There must be something inside. However, Yin Nuashing was a little nervous. He didn't know what kind of stone was. Although he felt that this black stone should be very strange, he really didn't know anything about it. He was just worried that the 40 million would be wasted. Ming Ming, on the other hand, was very calm. Her purple eyes stared unblinkingly at the black boulder that was constantly being cut. She patted Yin Nuashing's face with her small hand and pressed her small mouth against his ear. She smiled sweetly and said, Big brother, don't worry. Little girl, what exactly is inside this stone lump? Hearing Ming's confident words, Yin Nuashing couldn't help but ask through telepathy. Ming doesn't know either. However, surprisingly, Ming shook her head, blinked her eyes, and said softly. Hearing the little girl's words, Yin Nuashing and Yu Yin couldn't stay calm. However, the next sentence made them sigh in relief. Ming feels that there's a very strong energy in the stone, but I don't know what it is. Ming shook her head and rubbed her little head on Yin Nuashing's chest. Chapter 72. After half a day, more than half of the entire sword in the stone had been cut off. Now, there was only a black stone less than a meter long and the sword hilt that was inserted diagonally. The rest had turned into a pile of black and silver stone powder on the ground. During this time, nothing dropped, not even an ordinary crystal. This made the group of elders somewhat disappointed. If a rare treasure was born, there should be all kinds of strange phenomena. But now, there is no movement at all. Could it be that this sword in the stone is just a broken stone used to scare people? Not necessarily. The sword hilt has not been cut off yet. Moreover, black stones are rare. There must be something inside. But the whole thing has been cut in half, and there is no movement at all. Everyone looked at the stone powder on the ground and felt a strange feeling in their hearts. They had been looking forward to it for so many years. Was it really a piece of useless stone? Some of the old men wiped the cold sweat off their foreheads. They also didn't want to believe this result. Their eyes were wide open as they stared at the sword hilt without blinking. They hoped that they could cut out some rare treasure from the sword hilt. Finally, after another hour, the black stone was almost completely cut, leaving only the hilt of the sword standing alone on the stone pillar. At this time, even Master Xiao couldn't calm down. There was an unconcealable disappointment in his eyes, but after a moment, he cheered up. He was also looking forward to something precious coming out of the sword hilt. Hey, fortunately, our divine weapon pavilion did not buy this sword in the stone. Otherwise, we would have suffered a great loss. What kind of rare treasure are you talking about? I think it's just a useless rock. It's not a bad choice to use it as a toilet. Seeing the stone powder on the ground, the people in gray robes from the divine weapon pavilion suddenly laughed out loud. It seemed that they did not have any hope. Maybe this was originally a trap. The stone workshop specially used it to trick those skilled stone masters. When these words were said, the people in the stone workshop immediately frowned. But because of the power of the divine weapon pavilion in the divine weapon city, even if they were 1,000 times unhappy, they could only swallow it down and curse in their hearts. Master Zhao's expression did not change. He was still waving his silver knife. Except for the sword hilt, all the stones were cut clean. They turned into black and silver stone powder and fell to the ground. Sigh. The old men in the workshop sighed heavily and kept shaking their heads. Some of them took a step forward and patted Yin Nuoxing's shoulder with their withered hands. Their eyes were filled with gratitude and regret. They were grateful that Yin Nuoxing had fulfilled their wish. Regretfully, the sword in the stone was not as rare as they had imagined. There was not even a single Xian crystal. Master Xiao held the sword hilt, but the silver knife could no longer go down. He looked at Yin Nuoxing apologetically. As for the people from the divine weapon pavilion, they were laughing out loud. Among the people present, there were those who mocked, those who sighed, those who felt regret, and those who felt pity. Young man, Master Xiao looked at Yin Nuoxing, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword, a little hesitant. Why is everyone in such a hurry? Isn't there still one more piece that hasn't been cut? Yin Nuoxing smiled and looked at everyone. He pointed at the 3-meter-long sword hilt in Master Zhao's hand and said. Everyone was stunned. Although the sword hilt looked quite big, there was no strange energy coming from it. Moreover, looking at his faint smile, could it be that there was still some hope? I think you've lost your mind from anger. Pretending to be a grandmaster of a generation, you've fallen miserably this time. The people from a divine weapon pavilion saw that he was still unwilling to give up and ridiculed him. Master Xiao, don't worry and cut it. Don't keep us in suspense. Yin Nuoxing glanced at them and ignored them. He looked at Master Xiao and smiled. All right, let's see what else you have to say when another pile of stone powder comes out. Seeing that they were ignored, the people from the divine weapon pavilion gnashed their teeth in hatred. They had never been treated like nothing. Master Xiao sighed. His deep eyes revealed a trace of ancientness, as if he had seen through the vicissitudes of life. He looked deeply at Yin Nuoxing and nodded his head lightly. He raised the silver knife in his right hand and slowly cut down. The corner of the sword hilt slowly peeled off, and a large piece of black and silver stone powder fell. With the speed of Master Zhao's knife, the silver knife also slowly cut towards the center of the sword hilt. Seeing that he was going to cut it again, everyone fell silent again. Their eyes were fixed on the sword hilt. This was their last hope. If something really happened and they couldn't see it with their own eyes, when they retired in the future, they would probably have an incurable heart disease. Master Zhao's knife speed became more and more difficult. Gradually, a layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. His eyes were wide open, and he seemed to be a little disappointed and dispirited. Gradually, under everyone's nervous gaze, the 2 ends of the 3-meter-long sword hilt had been cut off, leaving only a long stone pole and a small part of the sword hilt. There was really only a pile of stone powder at the original spot. Nothing else appeared. There were no strange phenomena, no energy fluctuations, and nothing strange happened. Yin Nuoxing swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He was also very nervous, and his left and right feet were constantly moving. However, when he saw Ming's calm little face, he didn't know why, but he also calmed down. Now, It seemed that he could only trust this little girl. In less than a quarter of an hour, the sword hilt disappeared, leaving only a fist-sized hilt. At this time, everyone in the stone workshop was discouraged. It seemed that there really wouldn't be anything else. It really is a useless piece of rock without anything. It's ridiculous that I actually waited here for half a day. It's simply a waste of time. When the person from the Divine Weapon Pavilion saw this, he scolded and looked impatient. What's the hurry? Isn't there another piece? Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes and looked at that person unhappily. Then he smiled at Master Xiao. When everyone heard this, they were a little stunned. Most of it had disappeared. Could it be that the remaining fist-sized object really had something? Looking at the young man's appearance, he seemed to be very confident. Master Xiao shook his head. At this point, he didn't expect anything else to come out because he couldn't feel any energy fluctuations at all. Perhaps it was just like what the person from the Divine Weapon Pavilion said. It was really a useless piece of rock. The last fist-sized rock was cut very slowly by Master Xiao. It was as if he was cutting it layer by layer. The black and silver stone skin floated to the ground one by one. Then, a faint silver light flowed out from the palm-sized crack in the rock, causing the originally disappointed crowd to slightly cheer up. Could it be that an immortal item had really come out? Would it cause some strange phenomenon? Gotcha! Seeing this scene, without waiting for the others to urge him or for Master Xiao to react, cracks suddenly appeared on the stone, and a bright silver light burst out, illuminating the entire hall. It was as if there were thousands of rays of light shining, bright as the day. The immortal treasure has come out. How is it possible? It's just a little bit. There really is an immortal treasure. The sword in the stone deserves its reputation. Seeing such a bright scene, everyone was excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Regardless of the strong light, they stared straight with their eyes wide open, wanting to be the first to witness the birth of the immortal treasure. At this time, Master Zhao's face was also filled with excitement. Originally, he didn't have any hope. He didn't expect that at the last moment, there would be a reversal. Bang! The light suddenly escaped. The stone skin burst and shot in all directions. A diamond-shaped silver-white crystal appeared in everyone's blazing eyes. Everyone was stunned for a moment, then exclaimed in surprise. This is a weapon, no? The core of a divine weapon. It should be the core of a famous weapon on the divine weapon ranking. Usually, the core of a weapon is circular. Only weapons that have reached a certain level will have a diamond-shaped core. Hey, I already said that it's a certain level. How do you know that it must be left behind by a weapon on the divine weapon ranking? Maybe it's just a forged weapon. The sword in the stone deserves its reputation. It really didn't deceive me. Hearing the burst of discussion, Yin Nuoxing also smiled. At least it didn't make the 40 million soup. No matter what it was still good. Moreover, for what the elders said, this diamond-shaped crystal, which was only the size of 2 fingers, seemed to be the core of a divine weapon. A divine weapon had the following components: the core of the weapon, the array pattern, and the soul. The core, which was second only to the soul, was the point where the energy output of a weapon gathered. It was the most important part, and the core of a divine weapon could be said to be a priceless treasure. It was separated from the weapon and became an ownerless object. If it was reimplanted into a weapon, it could still be activated. It contained the core of a divine weapon. Entering another weapon was equivalent to reviving the original divine weapon in a different way. Little brother, we are willing to buy it. I wonder what price you want. I offer 26 billion. On behalf of the Divine Weapon Pavilion, I offer 27 billion. F*CK. What right do you have to represent the Divine Weapon Pavilion? 28 billion. The core of a divine weapon on the divine weapon ranking. This title represented everything. There was no need for any reason, just this title was enough. This was because it represented a kind of extreme, a kind of kingly way. It was said that the divine weapons on the divine weapon ranking could kill gods. Looking at the forceful auction in the hall, this scene reminded Yin Nuoxing of the auction in Xingqiu City. It was called the riot caused by a piece of leaf incident, which made him laugh involuntarily. Master Shao looked at the crystal and sighed. He felt relieved and refreshed. After waiting for so many years, he was finally not disappointed. The core of a divine weapon? I wonder which divine weapon it will be when it reappears. Yin Nuoxing muttered and patted Ming's head. Ever since the crystal appeared, the little girl had been giggling in Yin Nuoxing's ear and constantly muttering that Ming said that this stone was very strange. Yuan sighed and smiled as she pinched Ming's proud little face. Just as everyone was arguing, the core that no one was paying attention to suddenly flickered. Then, the silver powder on the ground floated up as if it had a life of its own and slowly gathered towards the core. After listening to the argument for a long time, Yin Nuoxing unintentionally glanced at the stone powder on the ground. Then, she was stunned. When she came to her senses, her body instantly turned cold. At this moment, all the silver stone powder on the ground had been absorbed into the core of the divine weapon. A slender silver needle about 2 meters long and 1 arm's width was suspended in the air. When Yin Nuoxing saw it, the silver needle instantly emitted a bright silver light. Waves of terrifying energy spread out like waves of water. Monstrous energy surged rapidly. Danger! Yin Nuoxing's face turned pale. She screamed and hugged Ming tightly. With one hand, she pulled Yuan into her arms. Light elements instantly surged, and she moved horizontally to the end of the hall and threw herself down. Everyone who heard the scream was stunned for a moment. When they sensed this terrifying energy, they turned around at the same time. Their gazes swept across, and they saw a slender silver sword sweeping across. Number 2 on the Divine Weapon ranking, Ling Hong's Sword. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.